It is an honor to meet you. For many years, Dorwinion has maintained excellent trade relations with the towns of the river valley, and the wealth of both sides has grown because of it. Inside a manor, Li Wei had secured an audience with its owner. As the founder of the Free City States and a lord of several cities, his claims could not be verified quickly, especially in this easternmost corner of Dorwinion, which for geographical and practical reasons had little first-hand knowledge of distant rumors. But when Li Wei casually revealed the name Nemesis and adopted the corresponding title, verification no longer mattered. The manor's owner was an elf, and elves are unusually attuned to magic and the uncanny. Li Wei exuded the mysterious in ways that practically shone, and an elf's senses picked up on that immediately. Once the manor owner realized this was no ordinary traveler, he decided the man was worth entertaining. "This is the best barrel in the manor. How does it taste?" Orifer, the elven owner, handed Li Wei a goblet. "Excellent. I don't have many words to describe it, but it makes me feel very good," Li Wei said. "Pleasure is the best description," Orifer agreed. "If a wine cannot make the drinker comfortable, then it fails in its purpose." Well said. These Dorwinian elves were a little different from the elves of Rivendell or the Woodland Realm. In addition to their people's usual refinement, they showed a more down-to-earth practicality, perhaps a result of living at a commercial crossroads. "Welcome to Dorwinion, the easternmost elven realm remaining on this continent," Orifer said. "Elven realm?" Li Wei observed. "But I see more humans than elves here." Orifer smiled. "It was an all-elven land once. Then humans migrated here, and we welcomed them. For a long while, humans were a minority. But in what feels like a blink to us, they multiplied. Now elves are the minority." Li Wei nodded, feeling his knowledge of local history expand. Long-lived peoples and short-lived peoples see time differently. What is centuries to one is a blink to another. I have always enjoyed speaking with elves, those reclusive, those martial, and those who have left their forests. "But this is my first time talking with elves from so far east," Li Wei said. "The elves of the west look down on us," Orifer replied. "Many of our kin who went west say we are unworthy because we never stood in the light of the two trees." "No, the elves I meant aren't that far west. I meant elves still on this continent," Li Wei tried to clarify, but his remark seemed to prick a chord. The conversation slipped into prideful reminiscence. "Our kin rarely leave this place. For us, this land is beautiful enough," Orifer said. "Arrogance has seen many of our people decline, yet Dorwinion has endured. For millennia, human kingdoms have claimed this land. We have not fought them for long because human rule rarely endures. Humans are fragile and easily corrupted." "Time is the finest defense," Li Wei murmured. He brought the conversation back to his purpose. "I have questions about the East Yi. Do not go further east," the manor owner said, the same warning Li Wei had already heard from the tavern guards. "The great enemy spreads sedition in the east. The people there have been misled. We have feared that their blind obedience will bring ruin. Even though we trade with them, all elves know, and some humans know, that this is only a temporary peace, and that temporary is shortening. Sooner or later, the horns of invasion will sound on the border, the horns of Mordor." "That day will not come," Li Wei said calmly. Orifer fell silent for a moment, then raised his goblet. "Let us drink." Glasses clinked. When Li Wei left the manor, he had a ferry pass for an eastern crossing and a handwritten letter. "May you and your two companions be reunited. Those two blue-robed staff-bearers, I have not heard from them in a long time, but I know they served the cause of peace in the east. May the sun and moon light your path." Li Wei hesitated. Had Orifer misunderstood? Strictly speaking, the two had not yet met, but they would be companions of sorts. He bowed in thanks. "Forgive me, I did not ask your name." "Orifer, an ordinary manor holder, from 2 generations ago until now, always," the elf said. At the appointed time in a nearby human town, Li Wei met Falodon. "How was it?" "Smooth. At least the ferry crossing will be normal. We can use ordinary means." "Ordinary?" Falodon studied Li Wei. "I'm curious what you mean by abnormal." "Flying in from the sky, tunneling underground, slipping through invisibly, any way where no one sees us is abnormal." Falodon shrugged. "Good. If things go normally, my plan won't be needed." He had gathered detailed terrain intel around the East Yi border. information that would keep them from being turned back like last time when he'd wandered into places he shouldn't. Night fell at the Dorwinian Eastye ferry. Merchant traffic was restricted, and guards inspected arrivals. Wine barrels from Dorwinian were unloaded into a shaded warehouse and guarded, for the wine was valuable and would be guarded until relieved. "Someone will relieve us soon. Plenty to drink tonight," a guard joked. "They do their wine well," another said. "But elves, they live too long. They run everything." A soft sound made the guards tense. They opened the warehouse door and found nothing. From outside, an enormous hole split open in the ground. Someone had used the old trick of hiding people in barrels. Li Wei climbed up a ladder, Falodin close behind. "The classic barrel method," Li Wei said. Falodin, a little dizzy from the crawl, grinned. "It's a bit much." They had to blend in now. While Li Wei wriggled through the tunnel, Falodin prepared disguises. He removed the Dunedain star from his shoulder, altered his clothes, and smeared powder on his face until his features were unrecognizable. A few changes transformed him from a ranger of Gondor into a ragged traveler or a vagrant. In East Yai, these were not suspicious forms. When Falodin turned to Li Wei to offer the fabrics, he froze. You don't need to disguise. Forgive me, I only noticed now. It's not what you think," Li Wei said with a wave. "I don't belong to this world." "Understood," Falodin relaxed. "For certain beings, appearance is a choice rather than a fixed fate. The surface form does not define them." At dawn, they split up. Falodin went to the alleys and fields where vagrants and itinerants gathered. Li Wei walked directly to the largest tavern in town. Information in such places moved slowly. People barely glanced when he pushed the door open, mostly because of the dark armor and linen robe he wore, an unusual combination that marked him as someone of status, not as dangerous. "A glass of wine and a roasted rabbit," he ordered. "Copper cup, silver cup, or gold cup?" the bartender asked. "Do the cups differ?" Li Wei replied. "The cup is different, and so is the price." Li Wei paused. Why spend extra for show? He settled for the copper cup. The cooked rabbit arrived, better than any he'd had in Dorwinian. He ate, listened, and allowed the bartender's curiosity to draw him into conversation. "Have you been to Dorwinian?" the bartender asked when he overheard Li Wei mention it. "Have you heard the rumors? People say the place is controlled by a very long-lived demon," the bartender said with a conspiratorial tone. Li Wei's mouth twitched. "That's false. They are elves, not demons." "The noble lords call them demons." The bartender shrugged and changed the subject. He had more to say. "I heard Westerners are strange. In some places they worship horses and prize them over people. In the southern deserts they eat snakes." "This world is mad. Are we the only sane people left?" The bartender sighed. Li Wei smiled thinly. The man did have a way of offending many by his bluntness. He asked, "Do you know the orcs?" "If you mean those ugly brutes, yes. No one likes them, though they are our allies in some places. I heard they're gathering in the capital, supposedly to deal with someone. I was hoping to see the capital's sights, if it doesn't turn into chaos." Capital. Deal with someone. Li Wei noted those 2 points, tucking them away. After a night's idle talk and a good meal, he left with a few more scraps of useful information than when he'd arrived. Chapter 162, The Uruk Tribe East, the Royal Capital, the OK Army, a mysterious figure. That morning, Li Wei and Falodin recited the same fragments of information at the same time. The OK Army has gathered at the Eastye Royal Capital, apparently to deal with some force threatening the city. They say the leader of that force is a traitor who spreads rumors to weaken ties between East Yai and Mordor, Falodin added, and behind him stands an evil warlock. Falodin went over the intelligence he'd pulled together from various sources. This army isn't like the others. There are orcs, sure, but also something called uruks, almost as tall as humans, and lots of terrifying ogres. One drifter told me an ogre crushed his house and killed his family. No one helped him. He fled the capital to get away from the chaos. That matches what I heard. Li Wei didn't blink. More or less. Your report just left out a few details. Falodin believed him immediately. What do we do next? Li Wei was the one who'd set this plan in motion. Falodin could only follow. We go to the royal capital. That place isn't close. Since they'd snuck in illegally, they couldn't bring horses. The quick mounts they'd borrowed from the territory had already been left in Dorwinion. It mattered little. This port town, right on the border with Dorwinion, often sent wagons to the capital filled with supplies and wine. Commoners weren't supposed to ride on those wagons, but exceptions exist, especially for the rich. Listen carefully. Don't show your faces, don't make a sound, and get off as soon as we arrive. Using Falodon's contacts, they boarded one of the express wagons to the royal capital. They traveled on and off for days. When the golden outlines of the palace and city first appeared on the horizon, the horses pulling the carriage grew restless. Li Wei peered through a small gap. The city gleamed with gold. Its walls threw back a faint halo. But the scene outside the walls was grim. Orcs in black armor swarmed the plains. Ogres loomed, yanking a sheep from a herd and gnawing it raw without bothering to strip the wool. Wagons rolled past the Oke army encampment, drawing hungry stares. Several ogres and orcs eyed the supplies, the horses, and the coachman with obvious intent. Suddenly, a larger figure slapped a restless orc and snarled from above. Then even the nearby ogre quieted. Uruks, Falodon whispered, a new kind of orc. It's recorded in Gondor's histories that they first appeared in 2475. They made Ithilien fall in their first battle, he added. They see themselves as superior to the smaller orcs. They call those orcs, "You stinking snagga! Behave yourselves!" The roar seemed to fill the air. The Uruks held a high rank among the orcs. They could treat ordinary orcs as slaves, and some stronger ones could even command ogres. They're going to be hard to deal with, Falodon said. Li Wei frowned. By size and bearing, these Uruks were like younger versions of Azog. Less individually powerful, perhaps, but far more numerous. 1,000 ordinary orcs with cleavers and spears were one thing. 1,000 Uruks in solid steel with battle axes, discipline, and brute strength were something else entirely. He felt the old itch to draw his weapon. These big, tough targets would be satisfying to cut down, but impulse had to wait. The situation required judgment. For some reason, one of the Uruks guarding the side of the carriage suddenly flinched, as if a blade had shaved past his head. He bared his fangs and bellowed, "Get back!" The ogre nearest him hesitated, sniffed, looked at the Uruk squad leader, then at the wagon, and finally turned away, grumbling as it went. Under the Uruk's watch, the convoy passed without further trouble. The restless orcs and beasts were quickly brought to heel. If you can't tell the difference between being full for a moment and being fed for a lifetime, you'll never survive in a place like this, Li Wei thought. Once they were safely within a corner of the royal capital, the coachman glanced around, tapped the side of the carriage twice, and muttered, "It's a real mess out there." Li Wei crawled out from beneath the opaque cover and surveyed the city beyond. "This is the first time I've seen orcs behave so well," he said. Falodon followed him out, only because the Uruks keep them in line. The coachman gave them a last warning. Don't run around at night. Don't go outside the city walls. Most of those orcs are manageable, but you can't count on every one of them not to lose control. Commoners are especially at risk unless you've got the strength to back you up. He studied the two men. One looked ragged, his features blurred by travel and dirt, but he was built and carried a dagger, someone not easy to fool. The other was more presentable. Li Wei wore a robe that suggested armor underneath, and his bearing hinted at past bloodshed. "Never mind, forget I said anything. Good luck to you." The coachman's tone softened. The deal was done. Falodon let out a rueful sigh. "Things have never gone this smoothly for me before." Li Wei smiled. "Why do you say that?" "Because I had no money," Falodon said. "The coin you gave the coachman will feed him for months," Li Wei replied. "If you'd had some other way, you'd have used it before." Falodon shook his head. "In the past, I would have found other ways." Li Wei's smile widened. "Don't worry. From now on, our moves will always go this smoothly." Chapter 163, Blue Robe Wizard. If you ignored the massive Oke army ringed outside the capital and looked only at the splendid palace in the city center, the place would seem almost serene. But behind the grand architecture and the outward display of wealth, poverty still gnawed at the city. An old, unsupported man walked the street in a threadbare robe, his wooden staff clutched as if it were his only support. A cloth covered his face from the nose down, probably to shield him from the sun. Someone like him must have traveled a lot. If we pay him a little, He'll talk, Falodon said from experience, and was the first to approach the old man. After a short exchange, the old man frowned and looked the tall ranger over carefully, as if trying to place him. "I'm no beggar," he said. "You look familiar, though," Falodon pressed. The old man shook his head. "What do you want to know? If I can tell you, I will." Li Wei joined them then. The old man glanced at him once and then could not look away. He no longer cared about Falodon, and leaning on his staff, walked right up to Li Wei. "You don't belong here," he said. "You share some facial traits with the people of this place, but at root, you're different. Most common folk wouldn't notice, but if a noble sees you, your difference will be exposed at once." "What?" Li Wei's chest tightened. "Exposed? If you don't want to be besieged tomorrow, follow me." Falodon's hand tightened on the dagger hidden at his side, but Li Wei shook his head to indicate he was staying put. They walked with their heads down through the back streets until they reached a quiet pavilion. The old man turned, pulled down the cloth from his face, and removed his hood. "It's you?" Falodon blurted. The old man shrugged off his ill-fitting cloak to reveal a deep blue robe underneath and a broad-brimmed hat slung at his waist, the same rich color as his clothes. Everything clicked into place. "Allow me to introduce myself properly," the old man said with a bow. "My name is LOTR. I am a wizard. You may not have heard the name. I rarely give it out. You'll hear rumors attached to it. Schemer, rumormonger, Morinitar, Dark Slayer, the like." He added with a wry curl of his lip. "I didn't expect you to return, Ranger of the West," LOTR said. "Actually, I didn't really want to come back," Falodon muttered. Then, taking a breath, he turned to the old man and introduced Li Wei. Falodon's voice swelled with awkward pride. "This is Legend Li Wei, master of square magic, founder of the Free City States, and dragon slayer of the Western Wilderness." He stopped, winded by his own exaggeration, and then recovered. "Since I set foot on this land, I never went west. I didn't expect such a great figure to appear in so few years." LOTR stroked his upturned beard, pleased. "Are you of the Dunedain?" "I am not," Li Wei replied. "Who sent you?" LOTR glanced westward, as if answering without saying it. "I came on my own." "You came alone?" Li Wei said slowly. "Yes, I always come alone," LOTR answered. He fell silent for a moment and then sighed. "It's hard for me to go home anymore. In a past confrontation, the great enemy left a mark on my mind. Something that corrupts. It draws me nearer to the shadow. I can no longer recall my homeland clearly, only that it was beautiful. My time is limited, Legend Li Wei. Decades, perhaps, at most a century, and I may not be myself." "Why do you say that?" Li Wei asked. LOTR only shook his head. "You cannot imagine the terror of that power. Ordinary measures cannot touch it." "Why are you here, then?" Li Wei asked. "I heard Sauron's influence here is great, and the situation unstable," LOTR said. Li Wei did not press the phrasing. He asked instead about the situation LOTR had hinted at. "It's urgent," LOTR said. "An army I helped raise in the east of Mordor is about to be attacked by the Aoke and the East Yi together. We have no proper fortifications. Things had been moving, slowly, but when the great enemy openly showed himself in Mordor and summoned the East, everything changed. Even weakened, his power is not for mortals to stand against. Those with the strongest wills can still be undone by Mordor's force. There's one last refuge further east built by those who resist. If the shadow arrives fully, I fear it will vanish." Falodon listened, puzzled by one thing. Wizards usually advise from the rear. Why was a strategist or a wizard walking in the enemy's home territory? "I had a premonition," LOTR said, reading the question in Falodon's face. "A wizard's premonition. Even without it, I would have come. Dunedain of the West, descendant of Numenor, you cannot know what a wizard can sometimes do. One person's actions can exceed your imagination." He smiled with a steadiness that made Falodon nod in reluctant agreement. "I'm going to the palace to see their king. If I can lift the corruption the great enemy placed on him, even if the court still distrusts the Free City States or still wants to clear that last sanctuary, it will buy us time. The orcs outside will keep them busy for a while." "Do you need help?" Li Wei asked, eager. "No," LOTR said. "Young legend, new leader. Though I do not know why you would risk coming personally and only bring one Dunedain companion, it would be safer if you stayed here. If a noble sees you, they will notice you are different and call their forces. You must remain hidden." I will bring back good news, LOTR added, nodding to both of them. Then, without another word, the blue-robed wizard turned and walked toward the palace. Chapter 164. Big Eyes. He said so himself. LOTR left the remark hanging in the air and strode confidently toward the palace. Near the pavilion, Li Wei leaned against a side railing while Falodon sat on the steps, waiting. This blue-robed wizard, maybe he really does have something special, Falodon said. Yes, after all, he is a wizard. They trusted the blue-robed man enough to relax, but he still hadn't returned by dinner time. When hunger nudged at him, Li Wei pulled a basket from beneath the bench. Inside were pieces of crams smeared with butter and honey. He took two, ate one, and handed the other to Falodon. A specialty from Dale. You won't find it here. Want to try? Falodon bit into it. Sweet and tasty. Whoever invented this must have worked hard. A pastry shop owner gave it to me. I've been carrying it around, hardly eaten any until now. Under warm sunlight, they chatted idly, like people on holiday. The scene was calm and pleasant, until a sudden gust of wind whipped past them. A sea-blue blur flashed by, then slipped back seconds later. Run! Someone shouted as the blur sprinted away. Falodon, still chewing, reacted slowly. Li Wei swallowed his bite, glanced toward the commotion, then calmly chewed a piece of dried meat. In the direction the blue-robed man had fled, a golden column of several hundred soldiers was pounding down the street. Each wore polished gilded armor and ornate helmets, clearly elite troops, fiercely giving chase. Should we run too? Falodon asked, legs already trembling. Li Wei didn't look back. They're not after us. If we stay calm, they probably won't suspect anything. Only the blue-robed man ran. They're chasing him. And we're just two ordinary passers-by. It makes sense. Falodon nodded. The most dangerous place can sometimes be the safest, he thought. They continued to eat in the pavilion, complacent, until the blue-robed wizard returned in a rush, shouting at the top of his lungs, "What are you still doing here? They're coming, run!" Li Wei looked up at LOTR. The old man had that expression of someone who insisted he was trying to help. Li Wei then saw the army had changed direction and was heading straight for them. He exchanged a look with Falodon. Now we should run. Agreed. They bolted, leaving LOTR behind. Wait for me, the wizard called, panting as he hurried after them. Li Wei, think fast. I know you'll have an idea. They ran until the pursuers encircled them. Falodon's feet skidded. He panted. The city swarmed with enemy troops, and beyond the walls even worse dangers waited. Tens of thousands of orcs and packs of giant beasts. A direct fight here would be madness. LOTR caught up, leaning on his staff, breathing hard. He offered a wry, awkward laugh. You'd better come up with something, or when I draw my sword, I won't be able to look after you. Li Wei was now certain LOTR was doing all this deliberately. The sound of close footsteps drew nearer. LOTR struck his staff into the ground. A flash of white light swallowed the three of them. The Imperial city guards, who had been closing in, stared at the empty pavement in confused silence. I could have sworn people were just here, one muttered. A heartbeat of silence. Then, with a thump, the three reappeared not far from the city gate, on the inner side of the wall. Falodon gaped. Is this wizardry? Even the blue-robed man looked a little surprised at his own power. The danger isn't over, he said quickly. The gate is crawling with orcs. We need a way out. I was told someone would take care of things, Falodon said, staring at LOTR. LOTR shook his head. Believe me, this was an accident. For complicated reasons, even after I temporarily drove out the darkness from the heart of the king on the throne, he still chose to cooperate with Sauron. That's some good news. The king has sobered up some and is no longer blindly following the dark enemy. The bad news, he's still hostile to us. And if you oppose the dark enemy as I do, you'll also have to deal with the eastern forces. Falodon's face tightened. LOTR glanced around and asked, Where's Li Wei? Falodon pointed to a 2-meter-high breach in the city wall. He's making a way out. LOTR walked over and inspected the gap. Using block magic on a city wall, any wall looks like paper to that method. It's just a pity we always end up playing defenders, Falodon muttered. And who says it can't be used defensively? LOTR countered. As he spoke, he watched Li Wei carving the opening wider. Then, with a satisfied clap, the seam in the wall sealed itself behind them. LOTR stood very still for a moment, then smiled. Excellent, amazing. Now I see why they called it the Master of Miraculous Block Magic. Don't be so curious about me yet, Li Wei said. Outside the wall, Li Wei asked, I'm more curious about you and that great army you mentioned. What happened? That's a long story. Alatar leaned a hand against the rough stone and began. The Dark Enemy has ruled this land for a long time, ever since I arrived, except for a brief respite at the end of the Second Age, when the last alliance defeated him. For a time, the people were free. But even after his defeat, his influence lingered. Darkness remained in people's hearts. Driving even a corner of it out took ages. As he spoke, Alatar faltered. He nearly stumbled to the ground, then steadied himself and looked up. A pair of enormous eyes was staring down at him. Chapter 165, First Show of Power. Alatar was startled, and the thing he had been leaning against looked even more so. The massive creature blinked, then scrambled to its feet. Only then did the three of them realize the wall had been a crouching giant beast all along. 3 big parasites, one of its frightened cries echoed as it bolted away, panicking. If such huge worms burrowed back inside, its belly would be eaten hollow. The creature thundered off in a frenzy toward the open plain in front of the city wall, and the defenders on the ramparts turned to watch. What's it doing? Someone asked. Just a dumb beast freaking out. Ignore it, another replied with a sneer. Under the soldiers' mocking stares, the monster's frantic pace slowed until it could run no farther. Only then did it risk a backward glance. The 3 parasites were gone. Parasites? The beast scratched its massive head, too dull to understand how or when those things had appeared. Why are you running around? It grunted to itself. Its movements were so loud they drew the attention of an Uruk squad leader. He hustled over and demanded answers. There are big parasites over there, the beast informed him in its blunt way. Cut them up. The leader looked where the beast pointed. There was nothing. Wait, lift me up. Okay. The beast seized the squad leader and hoisted him overhead. From that higher vantage, he finally made out 3 small figures. There, 3 people. Hold on. A blue robe? It's that damned wizard. Chase them. Those are not parasites. The beast, furious at having been tricked, threw the squad leader to the ground and lunged after the fleeing figures, baring fangs and claws. The leader spat and coughed, then barked orders back to the formation. Wizards spotted! After them! A band of Uruk, nearly as tall as humans, rushed off in pursuit. One smarter orc, seeing the distance, manned a trebuchet and let fly a missile. A wailing scream cut the air. Something splattered. Li Wei glanced back, but the blue-robed wizard beside him seemed used to the chaos and said, Ignore it. Keep running. Thumps and rumbling approached from behind. The wizard gripped his wooden staff. If it's only one, I'll try. He stopped, raised the staff, and chanted an arcane spell. A flash of white light streaked out. The giant beast staggered and froze. Alatar drew his longbow with practiced speed and knocked an arrow in a single smooth motion. The shaft flew and struck true, burying itself in the beast's eye socket. The monster roared in pain and, shaking off the daze, crashed forward, smashing hands into the ground as it charged and rolled. Another arrow from Alatar struck the beast's hide, but only grazed the outer layer. No blood showed, just a deep bruise through the thick fat. Still, it was enough. Flames flared, and a dark figure surged forward, longsword gleaming. Be careful, the blue-robed wizard shouted, but before the spellcaster could finish, the inscrutable lord himself met the beast head-on. Amber runes burst to life across his body, and the runic ring on his hand blazed like a miniature sun. The wizard halted his incantation and narrowed his eyes. A ring? With or without the wizard's aid, the beast's blow did nothing. Shielded by the runic ring, Li Wei took the full force of the strike and didn't even step back. That impact finished charging his skill, armor break. He swung the longsword, and the blade tore through hide and fat, sank into flesh, and seemed to rake bone. The creature dropped to its knees, its flab sizzling under the runic assault. 7 or 8 more strikes, and the beast went silent. Kiting with bows is safer, but it can't match the raw thrill of sword-meeting strength. The Uruk pursuers halted at once. Everyone knew how dangerous a single giant beast could be. In Ithilien, bringing one down usually required dozens of well-trained human rangers. Something didn't add up. These 3 were not ordinary. Each of them looked like a fighting force by themselves. Engaging directly would be foolish. The Uruk squad leader's mind raced. But the orcs were less patient. A small vanguard of orcs dashed forward and were hurled back like meteors. "Hold," the squad leader ordered, reining them in. "Wait for the Olog. Let them be the vanguard. The orcs will surround from behind. No matter how formidable those three are, they won't escape once the Olog join the fight." If the Olog, massive, almost golem-like brutes, came forward, the three would indeed be in grave danger. Olog could take on multiple iron golems, break netherite alloy armor, and had enough intelligence to coordinate. Li Wei squinted at the approaching, fully armored Olog and said, "Actually, those Olog are more trouble than the giant beasts." As the orcs split off to encircle them, Li Wei pulled 2 ender pearls from his pouch and handed one to each of the companions at his flank. "Throw these. They'll teleport you to where they land." "Got it," Followden took his carefully. "Oh, eat this before you throw it." Li Wei handed over a golden apple. "Teleporting with a pearl does some damage. This will protect you." "What about me?" the blue-robed wizard asked, staring at the apple. "You'll be fine," Li Wei said. The Olog drew closer and the orcs tightened their ring. Suddenly, 3 pearls arced over the encirclement and landed in an open spot behind them. A puff of purple particles marked where they had been. The Uruk squad leader rubbed his eyes and rushed forward. Thud, 3 figures materialized. Falodon hit the ground hard. His golden shield was badly damaged. Li Wei, protected by Fall Protection 4 and the runic ring, shrugged off the landing as trivial. He could throw dozens of pearls before taking real harm. "Ouch, my foot!" LOTR staggered a few paces, limping in pain, but the pursuers were momentarily delayed, and the trio moved at once. "Give me one of those apples, too," the wizard called as they ran. Li Wei glanced at his overhead health bar, untouched. "You think golden apples grow like rice? We'll talk when you actually need one." Chapter 166, Bold Bandit Stamina Always Shaped a Journey. Fortunately for the 3 of them, none of them were lacking. They ran for a day and a night. At last, in an open space off the main road and with no pursuers in sight, they allowed themselves to rest. "Okay, now explain exactly what happened," Li Wei said as he lit a fire, set an iron pot, and began to cook. While the broth simmered, he added, "First, your fight with Sauron and your corruption. I think you should explain those rings on your hand first," Falodun cut in. "Most rings with strange powers in this world aren't good news." "That's true. The last time I saw something like that was thousands of years ago. A man named Kamul. He became the strongest fighter in the East thanks to a ring. He had wealth and power and even some magic. Some called him the Black Wizard. But in the end, the ring corrupted him and he became a servant of the great enemy, a ring wraith." Falodun's words pulled LOTR to attention. A powerful warrior who dabbled in magic, then turned into something else. The description struck a familiar chord. Li Wei folded his arms. "I've already warned you how dangerous those are. If the rings on your hand are like that, you should take them off now. I can help, even if it makes things worse for me." "My rings aren't like that," LOTR said. "I forged them myself. They only hold pure protective wards. They have nothing to do with Sauron's ring." "So that's good," Falodun breathed. "All right, your turn. Tell us what happened to you." Li Wei ladled fresh broth into 3 wooden bowls and handed them out. LOTR took a grateful sip and sighed as the warm soup steadied his senses. "You want the story?" Li Wei nodded. LOTR finished his bowl as if savoring it for strength, then put the bowl down and stepped a short distance away. He lifted his hands, and the sky above them dimmed as if pressed by shadow. His sea-blue robes billowed without wind. A hollow darkness leaked from him. The wise light in the wizard's eyes vanished and was replaced by a cold, hard edge. "Like this," he said, his voice thin and sharp enough to sting. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the sensation snapped away. The darkness dissipated. Falodun, who had been staring, blinked and shook his head back to reality. Li Wei had watched it casually from start to finish. "These episodes are getting worse," LOTR murmured. "I have milk," Li Wei offered. "It might help." LOTR took the cup without hesitation and drank it down. "Thank you. It helps, but only for a short while." He gave Li Wei a rueful smile. "It's a persistent corruption, like a beacon embedded in my mind. The milk soothes it temporarily, but to cure it I have to eliminate the source." He sighed. "I've learned to live with it, and for now, I'll do everything I can to keep things in order." A metallic clank came from the main road just then. Followed snapped the fire out and covered the pot. LOTR shielded his wooden bowl. The three of them crouched and watched. A gilded carriage barreled by the road, wheels throwing up gravel. It was escorted by a small troop of armored riders, Imperial guards. A noble's carriage, LOTR said softly. Those are the capital's elite. Three masked bandits sprang out from the roadside. One was clad in black plate and huge enough that cavalry charges bounced harmlessly off him. The second wore a ragged coat and wielded a heavy wooden staff, a veteran who could fell enemies through helmets with a single blow. The third moved like a shadow, fast, with a dagger and a longbow. The untouched sword at his hip suggested he could use that too. The Imperial guards fought, but more than half of them fell untouched, while the three bandits remained unscathed. The remaining guards scrambled, dragged the noble from the carriage, shoved him onto a horse, and fled. The noble tried to shout, pointing back at the carriage, but a guard clapped a hand over his mouth and hustled him away. The bandits didn't pursue. They clumsily rifled through the carriage, took what they wanted, and then disappeared down a service road. A little later, in a barren stretch away from the main route, they stopped to divide the spoils. LOTR produced what he'd taken, a letter with a royal seal. I also found a gilded short dagger and some coins, he added. That could come in handy. Falodon dumped his haul on the ground. I found food, and some pastries I've never seen before. Li Wei set a plate down with a few oddly shaped small cakes. The two of them grinned, and Li Wei peeled off the top of one. Don't look at me like that. You took all the useful stuff. I'm allowed to grab food along the way. All right, fair enough, Falodon said. LOTR sampled a cake, then opened the sealed letter. As he read, the more his expression hardened. It's a mobilization order, he said finally. 3 focal regions are named. He read aloud. The winding harbor in the north, Aigu City in the south, and the fortified town clusters along the eastern main road. Each of those has considerable force, he continued. If they manage to join up with the capital's army, there might not be a single power left in the east that can stop them. Wasn't that messenger intercepted? Falodon asked. No. LOTR's voice was flat. This letter is only from one of the groups, probably the least important, Sethity. There are 3 other convoys already heading for those regions. Li Wei leaned over and scanned the parchment. It says they only just set out, right? That means they're still on the road. If we hurry, we can still catch them. Falodon considered. We could maybe catch one of the groups. At most one. That's still something, Li Wei said. Even stopping one convoy would help. No one answered about direction. After a beat, Li Wei looked up from the letter with a small smile. But we're only 3 people. 3 people, LOTR echoed with emphasis, 2 of whom are definitely crazy. Falodon glanced from one to the other, then took a step back as their eyes slid toward him. Thanks to Old B for the 5,000-point reward, and thanks to everyone who voted, recommended, and supported with monthly tickets. Chapter 167. The Scout, me? Go take out a squad of guards? That's insane. On the main road heading north, Falodon rode the horse they'd taken from the messenger. No matter how far he went, he saw no other couriers or patrols on that road. He breathed a quiet sigh of relief. At least he wouldn't have to face a squad of guards right away. He remembered the earlier discussion. It's one thing for the 3 of us to overwhelm a few accompanying guards together, but having each of us take on an entire squad, that's unreasonable. How about this? One of the others had said. We do what we can. Even if we can't intercept the army's orders, we can still pick up intelligence. Knowing what the enemy intends is better than stumbling around blind. That was their plan. Not far from the city, Falodon slowed the horse and let it go. He didn't want the messenger's mount, possibly marked, to be recognized. He covered his face, pulled on a locally distinctive robe he'd bought somewhere, and walked into the city. Compared with the ordinary townsfolk, he still looked conspicuous. Some people ignored him, some passed him with a glance, others threw disdainful looks. Wilderness hunter, wanderer, beggar, labels didn't matter. The important thing was no one suspected he was a foreigner. That was already half the battle. A port city on the Rune Inland Sea, he thought, looking up at the crowded rooftops. Noisy markets, narrow alleys, outsiders always get lost. If only he could fly. He paused when voices drifted from a small roadside tavern. I saw them. Those guards from the royal capital went straight to the city lord's house. Just a few rebels, someone else said over his wine. Our Golden Glory cavalry will trample them soon. The last place that gave us trouble was Rovanian, another scoffed. That at least was a proper kingdom. These so-called rebels, more like a bandit camp. They drank and argued about politics and entertainment everywhere. These men were regulars, and the tavern owner agreed with them, the talk growing loud and confident. Then a contrarian voice chimed in. I don't think so. I heard those traitors have a lot of troops. Falodan stepped into the room, putting on an air of someone well-informed. What troops? Clang. A leathern-armored Easterling slammed his cup down. Who do you think's leading them? The guards are decked out in gold, commanded by a great commander whose helmet bears the white horns of LOTR. A lone wilderness hunter, even 10 of you together, wouldn't match one of that commander's hands. I don't believe it, the hunter muttered, challenged. You don't know, the hunter insisted. I've heard the rebels dragged in a lot of people. They've got a strong commander. Nonsense, another cut in. You hunters must have hit your head in the wild. We've got powerful guards and the Golden Glory cavalry, led by a two-horned great commander himself. What are those handfuls of people to us? But I heard they have an evil sorcerer, terrifying. He can fling lightning with a hand and strike down several men at once. Pfft! The tavern erupted in snorts. What kind of rubbish is that? Where did you hear such nonsense? And even if it's true, what then? The royal capital's developed a new weapon, fire bombs. One of those lands in a crowd, and people go up like torches. No matter how strong an evil sorcerer is, there's only one. We've got hundreds, even thousands of bombardiers. What's one sorcerer to that? The hunter's voice faltered. Well, even if they can't win in open battle, they'll retreat. They'll defend from their stronghold. Can those fire bombs burn down walls too? You're so uneducated, someone sneered, pointing. Hunters with bows, you can't catch anything out there, so you come back and spread whatever rumors you hear to feel important. The regulars picked apart his words with practiced ease. Where a small squad might have gone, what they might be up to. The hunter grew quieter and finally bolted from the tavern, unable to stay. Ha! At least he knows when to be ashamed, the men toasted. Outside, Faladan pulled a scrap of paper and a pen and wrote down everything he'd overheard. No sign of embarrassment crossed his face. This was intelligence, and the first peace in the port city had come easily. People guarding their secrets will often lie to you, but those who reveal things while unaware lend far greater credibility to their words. Great commander, cavalry, troops leaving from the South City gate, fire bombs that set people ablaze. He tucked the notes away and moved deeper into the city. The bigger and wealthier a place, the more secrets it hid. 100 years of living had taught him that everyone, no matter who, had weaknesses, and those tended to be predictable. The gold coins he'd taken earlier would come in handy. I can't let those two look down on me, he thought. Whether long-term hiding in the wild or rubbing shoulders with crowds, blending in was second nature to a wanderer. So was it for a sorcerer, until complacency betrayed them. In a town in the eastern reaches of the Easterlings, a carriage rolled through the city gate. A little later, an old man with a staff walked in after it. Alatar watched him approach and murmured, "An old wanderer in tattered robes." The guards barely glanced at the frail figure. They didn't notice the subtle signs that set him apart. Arrogance and laxity are a dangerous combination, and often the harbinger of destruction. Chapter 168, The Big Hand. A bustling market had sprung up at the city gates, welcoming merchants and travelers. Blacksmiths hammered away inside their shops. A jeweler fussed over a necklace. Wagons stacked with vegetables and fruit rumbled through the lane, and piles of timber sat in the open, waiting to be used for new houses and fortifications. It looked prosperous and secure. But a crowded town never made everyone rich. Behind the market's bright face, there were always shadows. Unless the town belonged to Li Wei, this one did not. Hurry up! Armored guards barked orders, driving a line of laborers to set wooden stakes and dig deep pits for construction. The scene was a harsh counterpoint to the market's cheer. Alatar leaned against the corner of a roadside house and watched. Patrols crisscrossed the square, soldiers manned the walls. For a town so heavily armed, exerting outside influence would be difficult. They're here. After a long wait, several people finally emerged from a garden at the center of town. One wore gleaming golden armor and stood tall. Another was in rich finery. The two moved toward a carriage. LOTR pushed off from the wall and headed the other direction, toward the construction site. "You lazy dogs, no time to dawdle. Get to work," a soldier shouted, berating a group of laborers who carried heavy loads as if the more noise he made, the stronger they would become. "You keep watch. I'll go fetch the next shift," another soldier said and left. One guard remained. Where did this tramp come from?" "Get lost," the soldier sneered. Thud! The soldier slumped to the ground, unconscious. "I really hate being called that," LOTR muttered, and with a foot pushed the fallen man aside. He walked up to the laborers and cleared his throat. "Are you going to live as slaves your whole lives?" he called. "The nobles and their guards enjoy fine living while you, people from the same town, are treated like beasts. A few coins buy them your time and your health. Those coins they toss you, pathetic. Low pay, backbreaking work, sometimes not even a proper meal. Do you know how much a hard black crust of bread costs now?" He spoke quietly and began to weave his magic. Moments later, something changed. The usually docile laborers broke into shouts and surged forward, clutching whatever they could as makeshift weapons. "Hey, what are you doing?" the remaining soldier shouted. "You want to rebel against the nobles?" LOTR asked the soldier. "Why would I?" the soldier faltered. "You will," LOTR said. Something in LOTR's will seized the soldier's head. The man went rigid, breath constricted as a vast shadow flooded his mind. The old wizard's eyes gleamed, his robe shifting from sea blue to a deeper, nearly black blue. "Obey me," came the command. The soldier's thoughts scattered. When he came to, he was gripping a weapon, standing with equally dazed comrades and the laborers behind them. They moved toward the central garden amid screams and shouts. A noble in fine clothes sprawled on the lawn, crawling backward in terror beside a tall warrior in golden armor who raised his longsword and struck. "Wait, he's not our city lord," a voice cried. "My lord, I." The soldier started and then fell. Chaos cascaded through the city. Blood ran toward the garden pond. LOTR strode through it all as if the carnage meant nothing. Angry laborers had smashed the carriage to pieces. He climbed onto it, rifled through the wreckage, and took out the letters he had come for. He knocked a fleeing noble unconscious with a staff and searched his pockets. "That's everything," he said to himself. The messages he needed were secure. Within minutes, the city's armed forces had quelled the sudden uprising. Whether the laborers and soldiers had been truly possessed or merely driven by a moment of fury, the disturbance ended as quickly as it had begun. There was no reason to linger. Suppressing the stirrings of violence and the darkness that tugged at him, LOTR slipped out of the city. "This was necessary," he murmured. "Power. Without it, how does one resist the great enemy? Only with enough strength can one repel or even force an enemy to submit." Corruption. A historian from the Easterlings later wrote, one of the eastern garrison towns was engulfed by a sudden riot. Laborers, angry at low wages and slave-like conditions, somehow turned the soldiers guarding them and stormed the central garden. The city lord, who had been walking there with a royal envoy, quickly rallied his men and suppressed the small rebellion. No one could explain what had seized those men. The affair ended for the moment. The envoy, shaken and sprawled beside the smashed carriage, clambered aboard and found only panic and empty pockets. "What happened?" the city lord demanded, anxiously. "I don't know. Forgive me. I had no right to look at those letters. I will return to the capital to beg for punishment," the envoy stammered. Whatever judgment one might pass on LOTR's methods, his objective had been met. The enemy's progress delayed. Meanwhile, in the southern Easterlings Pass city, in the largest and most conspicuous hall, a guest's appointed room on an upper floor held a man huddled over a sheet of paper. His hands trembled as he wrote the first line. "As I write this, my mind is tearing apart," he scrawled. "I'm tired of this life and do not want to go on. Thoughts gnaw at me, stealing my sleep. I cannot even taste the sweetness of cake." It began with something small. "A few days ago, I followed the king's orders and carried a letter to the pass. On the road, a brazen fellow stepped in my path, trying to snatch it. I drew the letter away from him and told my Imperial guards to seize and question him. What came next I had not imagined. I underestimated that man's strength. His black armor wouldn't take a blade. His weapon vomited fire, and a terrible golden light hovered about him. My guards were thrown to the ground, roasted into charred corpses by flame. That flame, whether it came from his weapon or his mouth, I cannot say. I am left wondering if he is even human or a monster wearing human skin. There was no time to think. Terror took over. I cut the carriage reins and fled on horseback as fast as I could. Everything became dreamlike. I remember only gatekeepers helping me down, their faces as frightened as mine. Though I completed my mission and came back here, the memory haunts me. I once prayed to and questioned the missionary of the great demon eye. He tried to comfort me, but his words were laced with sarcasm. He knew nothing. He knows nothing because he never heard that noise, the sound that seems to come from the nether. That black armor, fused with the night, appears in my dreams. He is a nightmare that never ends, always behind me. Even now, there are footsteps outside my door, knocks that make the plaster crack. When I look, the knocks and the cracks vanish. Perhaps I have been tormented by hallucinations for too long. Man or monster, I will not let him find me. Demon eye, window, someone. Chapter 169, Results. Lightning streaked across the sky, announcing an approaching downpour. Thunder cracked. A guard who had been cleaning the room gave a startled cry and collapsed to the floor. Several papers, covered in strange script and splattered with blood, scattered in the wind. The candle guttered out, the last light in the chamber vanished. The guard could only stare at the window with its missing pane as the wind howled and damp darkness poured in. His mouth opened wider and wider, terror taking hold of him. Ah! Rain and screams followed the thunder. Quick! Quick! The captain of the guard received the alarm and hastily mustered a squad, racing through the sheets of rain toward the hall. The clatter of armor and the pounding footsteps woke many who had not yet slept. What's happening? The residents asked uneasily, but they received no clear answer. Only afterward did they learn that the city lord had evacuated the entire household, family, and guards alike from that once luxurious, sturdy hall, as if something terrible had taken up residence inside. The next day, carpenters were summoned to board up and seal a room in the hall. Save us, servant of the eye. An evil thing lurks within that chamber. The city lord had gone personally to plead with an envoy sent by the eye. This time, the envoy took the matter seriously. The missing messenger and the other frightened accounts might be dismissed as nightmares and cowardice, but the city lord himself had come, and clearly something had happened in that hall. Let me see it, the envoy said, and followed the city lord. They ordered the boarded window pried open with an axe. Crack! Dust filled the air. Sunlight cut through the square hole in the window and fell across a tidy desk. Several pages lay arranged on it, stained with blood, but otherwise neat. That's it, the city lord said. At his urging, the envoy picked up the notes and began to read them aloud, working through them in order. His breathing gradually steadied as he read. After a moment, he set the papers back down, coughed, and asked quietly, "Has anyone suspicious been seen in the city lately?" "No, we haven't found anyone out of the ordinary," the city lord answered. For some reason, the envoy's voice trembled slightly. He pointed at the notes. "These are evil writings. Burn them." Although the city lord bristled at the envoy's commanding tone, the envoy was, after all, sent by the great power of Mordor. The city lord swallowed his displeasure. The pages were thrown into the flame and quickly consumed. Watching the warm glow, the envoy, who normally trafficked in darkness, felt a curious calm. "I will report this to my master," he said. That same day, the envoy set out for Mordor. A rumor rippled through the city. The royal messenger had vanished, and the things on his desk had been swallowed by an unnameable monster. Before the envoy left, the city lord sent urgent dispatches to the royal capital. He would await the report the envoy would bring from the Eye, and for now would guard his territory against some possible threat, making it inconvenient to send many troops. A few days later, in Mordor, at Barad-dûr, the envoy prostrated himself and recounted the rumor from the east to the ringwraiths. "Nonsense," a thin, piercing voice replied from the indistinct phantoms. "Unsubstantiated rumors." Most of the ringwraiths dismissed the tale. One did not. Kamal, the Easterling, stepped forward from among the wraiths, looking down at the envoy. "Tell me everything you know," he ordered. The envoy regretted his carelessness. Why had he burned those notes? But he told the truth as best he could. A fire-breathing thing in black, spiked armor. A golden light that surrounded and protected him so no one could come within half a step. No one could harm him. A mysterious power that gave people nightmares and could pull them out of their dreams. A messenger had been harmed by that power. Kamul exchanged a look with another wraith. "Make sure he isn't referring to the Lord himself," he murmured, then said, "I will investigate." With that, he vanished. Days later, a black horse stamped through the pass. Kamal, once legend and leader of the Easterlings, returned to the region. He first visited the spot where the messenger had disappeared and searched carefully, finding no evidence of any supernatural force. At the city lord's request, he then examined the whole hall, inside and out, but found nothing except for the square opening in the window. Square, a thought flashed through his mind. He considered whether the figure might be west of the Misty Mountains and dismissed it as unlikely. Concluding that the chances were near zero, he told those gathered, "There is no monster, only frightened imaginations. Trust in our Lord, trust in the Eye. The Master will guard you from strange things," the wraith intoned. The city lord breathed a sigh of relief, knelt, donated a large sum to the envoy, and ordered the defenses of his territory strengthened. The envoy's decree was circulated. "Do not believe rumors. Do not spread rumors. No creature in this world can come out of dreams." "The Eye will protect us," people repeated. In a small town some distance from the capital, 3 men met in a narrow alley. "I brought a lot of intelligence from the port city. It should be useful," Falodon said, producing a stack of notes from his cloak. "The Easterlings still hide considerable capability. Luckily, some people aren't cautious. Otherwise, we wouldn't have known this until the war began." "Well done," LOTR praised. "Even the best spies could only have achieved this." "And you, how did it go on your end?" Falodon asked Li Wei. Li Wei looked uncomfortable. "It wasn't very smooth," he admitted. "At first I caught up with the messenger's caravan, but I lost track of him for a moment and he escaped. I chased him as far as their past city. I planned to slip into his room and capture him for questioning, but he was very alert. Every time I tried to move, he'd look up. A few times, his sudden turns almost caught me. After several failed attempts at stealth, I broke through a window and went in. He jumped out. His movements were clumsy. He even tripped over a chair when he got up and struck his nose, so he bled all over the desk. I thought he might be unwell, so I didn't pursue him. I took everything from the desk I could carry, some opened letters and records of troop numbers for various detachments. It's not nothing." Falodon and LOTR exchanged approving looks. "Good work," LOTR said, with a small, inscrutable smile. "Wizards always have their methods." Li Wei shrugged. The 3 of them fell into planning, each piece of gathered intelligence adding another piece to the unfolding picture. Chapter 170, Connate Fire Pellets? Li Wei flipped through the intelligence Falodon had gathered, and the more he read, the more curious he became. The device sounded a lot like the dwarves' flashbang pellet, disorienting and designed to break formations. Still, there was always something to be learned. With Falodon's careful reports and the statistics Li Wei had compiled, the 3 of them now had a solid grasp of the Easterlings' forces. Falodon had been the most effective of the 3. He hadn't managed to intercept every message or halt the army's advance, but he had thoroughly probed nearly all the information coming out of the port city. He could tell which army was heading where, how many men were in each column, what types of troops they were, and when they would move. In this region, the army movements had become almost transparent. A captain of the Royal Guard ran off with a Dorwinian elf and tried to sail across the inland sea. Falodon read, then shrugged. "He snuck out by ship. Do we really need to investigate something like that?" "What if it turns out to be useful?" the blue robe said. "All right," Falodon conceded. "Whatever else, the royal capital won't be able to assemble quickly. Their routes and timing are clear enough." "I should send word back," Li Wei said. "Our faction doesn't know any of this yet." "I've always wondered something," Li Wei added after a pause. "Which faction are you talking about?" Falodon recounted the rumors he'd heard over the last few days. They call you traitors and colluders. It wasn't just a simple rebellion then. There was a larger power at work, far greater than local insurgents. I said it from the start, the Blue Robe replied, with a little nod. It's east of Mordor and south of the Easterlings. Connaught, Falodon supplied. They rode on over rain-softened ground that still smelled fresh even under yellowing, rain-bitten grass. The three of them rode hard, and before long they reached the pass city in the southern Easterlings. It felt different from the last time LOTR had passed through. The city's strange, LOTR said, staring at the streets, where people moved quickly and silently, finishing errands as if trying to get home before nightfall. LOTR stopped a passerby and asked what was happening, but the man only shook his head and made a shushing gesture. Falodon stepped forward and tried his own questioning. After a moment, he relayed what he'd learned. Terrifying rumors. Folks whisper that a creature has appeared here, something that comes out of nightmares. They say nothing can stop it, even the ringwraiths can't trace it. One of the royal capital's messengers was attacked not long ago, the passerby added. He's still convalescing in a sealed, windowless room. Monster? LOTR asked, turning to Liwei. This pass lay squarely within Liwei's responsibilities. Do you know anything about this? Liwei thought it over. I don't. Maybe the messenger jumped out a window to try to escape and was attacked while falling. I didn't pursue him at the time. A pity, LOTR said with a small smile. If such a beast exists, I'd like to see it meet my sword, or perhaps give us some new materials. He became thoughtful. I suspect these oddities are tied to the great enemy and his servants. He fashions methods to solidify his hold, and sometimes those methods backfire. That could explain why the Easterling army's gathering has been delayed, Falodon observed. They didn't linger to pry further into the city's whispered terrors. The three of them pushed on, skirting the mountain defiles to the rear of Mordor, and then crossing a stretch of open wilderness until the landscape grew drier and more exposed. This is the outermost border of Rune Khanate, LOTR said. South of the Khanate lies desert, beyond that near Harad. Officially, Khan and Harad are allies. Southern caravans pass through here on their way north to the Easterlings, Falodon said. And in reality? Liwei asked. In reality, LOTR smiled faintly. You'll see soon enough. Khanate was a sun-scorched borderland carved off from the waste by a river. Sand and sun dominated the land. The territory wasn't large, but trade routes running north and south had made it comparatively prosperous. That had not always been the case. In the beginning, Khanate fought both the Easterlings and the Haradrim, LOTR explained as they rode. A small people, squeezed between two great powers, their existence was precarious. When the Wainriders pushed south, many Khanate folk were driven into Harad. To resist, they allied with the Haradrim, and the three groups spilled into a great, ruinous struggle. There were no true victors, he continued. At that time, the great enemy was consolidating in Mordor. He sent envoys and used force to stop the fighting, then imposed his rule, forcing the three peoples into submission and compelling a worship that lasted generations. That faith runs deep. It's hard to uproot. Even so, the great enemy couldn't tend to every corner of his realm, LOTR said. The Easterlings and Haradrim have vast territories and wealth. Even while paying tribute to Mordor, they could remain prosperous. The Connaught can't. Their lands are small and their resources meager. If Mordor hadn't forbade the larger peoples from absorbing the Connaught, it might have disappeared long ago. For a time, that decree brought peace and development, he added, but peace didn't last. As Mordor's appetite for war grew, the Connaught were forced to deliver ever larger quantities of supplies and horses. Mordor didn't care whether they could afford it. What mattered was that the tribute arrived. Still, their devotion barely wavered, stubborn and ingrained. Once, my friend Palando and I came east with our leader Saruman, LOTR said more quietly. We worked here and further east for many years. Saruman judged these peoples beyond salvation and returned alone to western Middle-earth. Palando later left as well. He now works in southern Harad. Only the two of us remained to contest the great enemy in the east. Before Saruman departed, however, he taught me a piece of magic, one that can free people from the great enemy's control. Oh? Li Wei, who had been listening from the saddle, straightened and looked at the blue robe with genuine curiosity. Chapter 171, Deadly Ill LOTR, didn't explain the magic that could free people from Sauron's influence, and Li Wei kept his little secret to himself. The three of them traveled on, and soon a city rose on the horizon. It was the capital of the Khanate. Compared with the capital of the East, this place felt rougher. The walls were a mix of wood and earth. Many roofs were thatched. The climate likely explained it. The sun here burned hot, and the ground was dusted with sand. "Wait, what's that?" Li Wei cried, hurrying toward a patch of sand. "Cactus?" Falodin guessed. "Oh yes, it's a local species. Do you like it?" the guide asked. "I like it a lot. Snap." Falodin pulled a cactus free by its roots and, with a quick turn at the crafting table, standardized it into a tidy square cactus. Seeing Li Wei's delighted face, Falodin offered, "Want me to find more?" "No need. One is enough." Just finding that cactus had already made the trip worthwhile. But once they passed the city gates, Li Wei realized he'd underestimated the place. "What's that?" he asked, pointing toward a caravan of people wrapped head to toe in white wool. "A caravan from Harad," Falodin said. "They crossed the desert to trade with us." Li Wei leaned closer. One look, and his eyes lit up. Rum. The merchants had mentioned rum among their goods, the fermented spirit made from sugarcane. "Would you like to try our premium rum?" one called. "No," Li Wei said. "I'm more curious about the sugarcane itself." "You want sugarcane?" the merchant asked, puzzled. "We rarely sell it. It's not very valuable, hard to store, and the journey here is long. Fresh cane spoils before it gets to us." "Like this," the merchant said, producing a short, slightly discolored stalk with a bite taken out of it. "I was just about to throw this away." He dug out several more pieces from the cart. This one looks okay." As the merchant began to peel it, Li Wei blurted, "Wait, sell it to me." The merchant paused. "2 coins, he shrugged, "or buy something else and I'll throw it in free." Given the distance they'd come, 2 coins was reasonable. A short while later, Li Wei rejoined LOTR and Falodin with a piece of southern sugarcane and a section of almond confection. Among the rejected pieces, one was still good, a piece he could standardize into sugarcane that would grow if planted near water. Cactus and sugarcane, 2 very useful items before they'd even reached the city center. Li Wei felt a new excitement. A city on the edge of desert, visited by Harad traders and nomads, had to contain other exotic crops from the far south. "Done looking?" LOTR asked, gathering them up and leading them deeper into the city. "Interested in news from the south?" Falodin asked Li Wei. "A little, mostly the local specialties," Li Wei answered. Falodin nodded. "Far south of the Great Harad is a vast grassland, and beyond that a jungle. Jungle folk live there. Both regions have animals and plants we've never seen." Li Wei's eyes brightened. "That sounds incredible." "It's very far," Falodin warned. "The Harad people say the jungle is many times the distance from Roadside Fort to the Lonely Mountain." Li Wei checked his map. Even if he rode without rest, lighting up this continent would take years. "Wait, what are you doing?" Falodin suddenly asked. Li Wei looked over and saw LOTR remove the ragged cloak he'd used as a disguise, revealing the deep blue robe beneath, and walk openly through the streets. In the East, a robe like that would have drawn a crowd and guards. "Here, don't worry. This is our territory," LOTR said. The locals barely noticed the robed wizard. A few guards gave him a slight bow, others pretended not to see. LOTR led them to the largest hall in the city. "My lord," the sentries greeted and inclined their heads toward him. He nodded and strode inside, but the 2 behind him were halted. "Before the king's hall, you must lay down your weapons," an officer ordered, moving to search them. His movements were cut off by a voice from within the hall. "They are my honored guests. Do not be rude." The guard hesitated, glanced at the blue robe, and stepped back. Li Wei and Falodin shared a look. The atmosphere felt off, like something unusual lay under the surface. "Long time no see, King of the Khanate," LOTR said, easing up the steps into the great chamber. "Ah, wise wizard, you come at exactly the right time. I have questions that need answering." The Khan on the throne, broad and once robust, now looked pallid and weak. He tried to rise but wavered. Anyone would have thought him ill at first sight. LOTR climbed the steps and stood beside him. "What troubles you, my king?" The ruler gave up the effort to stand, sinking back against the throne. His voice was thin. Sauron, he sent a messenger. If we do not surrender, he will kill us all. Do not worry, LOTR soothed. We have stalled the armies of the East and Mordor. They will not muster quickly. Ah, that is good. A flicker of relief crossed the king's cloudy eyes, though he himself didn't seem sure why he felt better. Li Wei could not hold back. He stepped forward and addressed LOTR by name. Is this the method you meant, the way to free this region's ruler from Sauron's hold? LOTR's face showed no pride in his answer. It's not very honorable, and to be honest, it's far from perfect. How so? LOTR spread his hands as if the answer were obvious. Look, Li Wei, since I came, this king no longer bows to the great enemy. He has found the courage to resist those who would oppress him. Li Wei shook his head. So your freedom is simply to swap one master for another. Sauron for you? Control? LOTR frowned. Don't use that word here. Not now. All I have done is help him follow his own heart more. LOTR's voice trailed, as if the explanation should be self-evident. Li Wei's hand flashed to his item bar and drew his longsword. You are dangerously wrong. Perhaps you need someone to clear your head. LOTR's expression darkened. I should not have expected Saruman to teach you anything wise. Legend of the West, Li Wei shot back. By your reckoning, what is good and what is evil? Must you abandon power simply because you fear it? LOTR asked. In my view, that is cowardice, he added. A cloud slid across the sun and the hall dimmed. In that brief shadow, LOTR's voice rang clear and resolute. This is merely a reasonable application of power. Thanks to Wuyan for the 2,000 coin reward. Thanks to the friends who voted with recommendation tickets and monthly tickets, and thanks to everyone for your support. P.S. In earlier notes and letters, Tolkien hinted that the two blue wizards who went east might eventually fall and become servants of Sauron, like Saruman. In later accounts, however, he suggested that LOTR and Palando's continued activity in the east may have kept Sauron's eastern allies from growing stronger, so perhaps they didn't fall after all. Why they did not return to Valinor after Sauron's final defeat remains unknown. I strongly suspect Tolkien, the king of unfinished plans, simply didn't sort out that plot hole. After much thought, I've decided to take an intermediate approach here. The blue wizards are corrupted, but still believe they pursue a righteous goal. Also, since restarting the map would be irrational, I'll speed the plot forward and focus on the core story. Whether it be judged good or bad, controversial or unquestioned, the future is always uncertain, waiting for those bold enough to change it. May fortune favor those strong enough and willing to fight. Chapter 172, Enemies on All Sides. So what will you do now, Legend of the West? LOTR stood beside the throne and looked down. Will you strike me down in the name of your justice? If you want to try, then come ahead. But I must warn you, if you kill me and wake the King of Connacht, you'll only make things worse. Right now we have only Mordor and the East Ye as enemies. Do that, and we'll have 3. Then no one will get out of this alive. The king slumped on the throne, unresponsive. Li Wei held his sword, unreadable. You really were taught by the same teacher, he said quietly. Of the 5 wizards who had come to Middle-earth, only LOTR and Saruman had arrived by choice. The other 3 had been summoned or sent. LOTR's voice was flat. Do you really think you can succeed by tearing everything down? No, I never expected this small group, caught in the middle, to fix everything. LOTR's expression didn't change. But Connacht still has its use. It can help us bleed the great enemy, the East Ye rebels who sided with him included. Worthless. Li Wei shook his head. No faith, no ideals, no goals, just people controlled and deceived by you. That's meaningless. How can you say it's meaningless? LOTR's tone turned grave. You don't know how hard life is here. People are ignorant, rigid, and all they can chant is the name of the evil eye. It's like that everywhere. How many families have been torn apart just to worship the evil eye? He demanded. Since I arrived, these people no longer have to suffer the great enemy's oppression, no longer have to ferry their wealth to Mordor in installments. The great enemy would drain them for his armies. I want nothing from them. Who is nobler? Who is despicable? You should be able to see that. The evil eye's faith is deep-rooted. If you aren't strong enough, how can you fight him? Li Wei stared at the blue-robed wizard. You've been too corrupted by that power, he said. Drink some milk and sober up. I'll never touch that stuff again in my life, LOTR refused decisively. Then I'll have to force you to drink. LOTR's eyes were cold. You can try. The tension in the hall tightened. Faladin gripped the ancient tomb sword. He took a step forward, but Liyue pushed him back. Leave this to me. Guard the door. If anyone asks, tell them there's a banquet inside. A banquet? Faladin glanced first at the grim-faced LOTR, then at Liyue's calm face. All right, I'll play bouncer for a while. He shrugged and stepped out. Foolish. I thought you were sensible, LOTR muttered as he descended the steps, staff in hand. When a man grows too sure of himself, he thinks everyone else is an idiot. Liyue drew his longsword. Before LOTR could say more, a lightning bolt leapt from his hand, striking at Liyue's feet and blasting a great hole in the floor. I do not wish to be your enemy. This is your final warning. Liyue simply stepped over the pit. Before coming here, I met 3 wizards. They all used spells, but you're the first to try to attack me directly. You wouldn't want to know what it tastes like. No, actually, I quite want to try. He took a step forward. Mortals always try to challenge things they do not understand. LOTR slammed his staff down. His sea-blue robe fluttered, though there was no wind. His figure seemed to tower, an illusion born of crushing spiritual pressure. Liyue recognized it immediately. Wizards and elves differed from mortals in their souls. Those with powerful souls could bend the world with will, creating true magic. The illusion made LOTR appear a giant wreathed in fire. Liyue downed a bottle of fire resistance potion, but the flames didn't erupt like a balrog. Lightning braided with the fire, and the two slammed down as one. Liyue's pupils narrowed. He drew a wooden shield. It shattered, going on cooldown. His runic ring, necklace, and belt flared gold, taking the brunt of the blow. The lightning and fire struck like against an unbreakable wall, or as if cleaved by a black blade, rippling out toward the hall's edges. In an instant, most of the chamber erupted into flame, everywhere except for the small patch beneath Liyue's feet and the space behind him. The runic shield broke, the emergency shield flared. LOTR's towering form dissolved back to a slender man. Indeed, unexpected, Liyue said, eyes cold. He lunged. Nemesis slashed mercilessly. LOTR raised his staff, and a solid white barrier sprang up, stopping the blade. The wizard spun defense into offense. His staff burst with a dazzling light and struck like lightning, colliding with Liyue's sword. The impact felt like a heavy hammer blow, the sort that would send any human or orc flying. But Liyue stood his ground like a nail driven into rock. He closed in and slashed, blow after blow, each strike harder than the last. LOTR finally drew a sword from his belt, the blade shrouded in scorching flame. With a lightning staff and a burning sword, and centuries of honed technique, he began to press Liyue back. Liyue dove and retreated, then unleashed a pure white sword chi that forced LOTR back. If that's all you've got, then I'm afraid you'll never defeat me, he said. LOTR stepped forward. Not just that. Liyue switched to the Maulorn staff, its 9 hells core humming in his hand. Now both had a staff and a treasured sword. Liyue flicked the Maulorn staff and conjured a flurry of small red bats. Hundreds of 9 hells fiery bats swarmed the blue-robed wizard. Too evil, LOTR muttered. Even he could not completely hide his distaste. The bats were vicious. Some struck the barrier and burst into flames, exploding and forcing LOTR to recoil. Like cursed fireworks, they detonated in succession. When one staff's viz ran low, Liyue switched to the other. The bats irritated LOTR and distracted him. Liyue pressed the advantage, his attacks growing stronger. He swallowed a Tier 2 strength potion and surged forward with a brutal combo. The bats continued to detonate against the barrier, forcing LOTR to waste energy on them. Liyue's strength built toward a finishing leap slash. Enough! LOTR inhaled sharply and slammed his staff into the ground. A massive halo of light exploded outward. The detonation cleared all the bats at once and hurled Liyue backward, nearly out the door. Outside, 2 guards heard the crash and turned. There's a banquet inside, Faladin called smoothly as he kept them at bay. The guards set their weapons in attitude but didn't enter. A new skirmish flared at the entrance. Faladin kept the doorway sealed. A white flash filled the hall, dimming everything. When the light faded, Liyue bit a golden apple to heal. LOTR stood gasping, staff planted in the floor, but the flames had gone from his blade. Li Wei advanced and swung his elven sword. Alatar grabbed his staff, but as sword met staff, the staff split and crumbled into splinters. The long sword passed cleanly over the broken staff and struck. For the first time in the fight, Li Wei felt something truly hit home. He swung again and Alatar fell to his knees, yet the wizard's health bar didn't seem to move. The strike had done something else. When Alatar hit the floor, his eyes cleared. The cold darkness that had sat in them vanished, as if something had been lifted. "You won," he said, voice quieter and more relaxed than before, as if freed. Li Wei sheathed his sword, unsettled by how unnaturally fast the wizard had fallen. Wizards, or Maya, even muffled in mortal frames, were dangerous. An unleashed one could have killed him with a single strike. At the instant Alatar's staff turned to dust, the Connaught king on the throne groaned. The pallor left his face. He sat up slowly, blinked, and looked around the burning hall. The wizard lay prone. A tall, black-armored warrior stood in the center. The king's personal guards were down at the door, and beside them stood a tall foreigner. The king took a deep breath. His posture straightened, and color returned to his cheeks. He spoke haltingly, as if emerging from a dream. "My memory is hazy, like a very long dream. Many phantoms walked before me in that dream." "O wise wizard, tell me, what happened?" he asked. Alatar answered plainly, "As you can see, King of Connaught, I was defeated." "Is that so?" The king picked up the precious sword before the throne and descended the steps. "Foreigners, you invaded my hall, struck down my guards, and even defeated the wise wizard who serves me." His voice hardened, but behind it were fractured memories, not quite fitting together. There was only one clear thing to him now: power. "Alatar, I will ask you more later." He stepped over the blue-robed man and pointed his sword at Li Wei. "But for now, these two foreigners will pay for intruding into my hall." Li Wei's eyes showed a faint helplessness. "I said I came to help you regain your clarity. Do you believe me?" "You speak of clarity." The king paused, then laughed. "Yes, I am clearer now than I have been in years. That dark voice in my head, like a festering wound, has gone, and with it I have seen the answer." "What is it?" Li Wei asked cautiously. "It is a true king," the king proclaimed. "Before, the throne held cowards. The people followed them and believed in a false dark lord, and that corrupted us. Now I know. Only with a truly powerful king can the people be led to resist this humiliating slavery. First, I will test my strength on you invaders. Then I will restore the Connaught to its former glory. Feel honored. You will be the first stepping stones on the path of the great Connaught's revival." Li Wei kicked the king aside and pushed him down. "Looks like he's still not quite lucid." "He's been corrupted too long," Alatar said. He rose and gently lifted the king back onto the throne so he could at least sleep in it. "Let him rest. Maybe there's still room for discussion after he recovers." "And you?" Li Wei asked. "Not great. Can I have a glass of milk?" He accepted the cup Alatar handed him and drank. "Thanks. It clears my head for a while." "I still have more," Alatar offered. "It will not cure the root, but it can ease the gloom temporarily." "I've told you, drink as much as you want." Alatar coughed, then shook his head. "No, don't worry, I can hold on." "Still," Li Wei said, "I should thank you. That sword strike didn't hit me, it hit something else." "You two going to chat all day?" Followed and asked from the doorway. He stood watching the scorched hall, impassive. "My suggestion, put out the fire. This place will be a ruin if it keeps burning." Buckets of water were poured and the flames were extinguished. The air cooled. Followed and finally came inside. The three of them stood together in the charred hall. "So what do you plan to do now?" Alatar asked. "The armies of Mordor and the East-Yi are already on the move," Alatar warned. "They won't be much slower than us, perhaps only a few days out. And now," he looked at the still drowsy king, "we might even lose our only ally." "It's all right," Li Wei said. "Aren't I here? Will you fight for Connaught against that army? Help a potential future enemy?" Followed and asked. He understood the situation. The king had been pulled alternately between Sauron and Alatar's influence. Waking from that did not mean he would stand with them. Once the wizard and Li Wei left, Sauron's hand, or that of the East Yi or Harad, might still fall here. This was bigger than one city. "I must remind you," Alatar added, "the people here still believe in the great enemy. That's faith, not control." "I intended to break that blind faith by more violent means," Alatar continued. But even my methods couldn't purge thousands of years of rumor and worship overnight. Don't assume everyone here is friendly because our arrival was unopposed. Their coldness was only because of the king's command. The moment he revokes it, the vendors and passersby will pull out knives and cleavers and swing. Especially you, Philodon. You don't want to know the Eastern humans' attitude toward the Dunedain. Don't reveal who you are. They won't even let the king's command protect you. I know, Philodon said calmly. They all turned to Li Wei, who would decide how to act. The fate of a nation and the course of the entire East could hinge on his words. LOTR sighed and reached for his staff, only to find his hand closing on a pile of splinters. He stared at them, uncomfortably daunted. No staff. Feels strange. Still, bows and swords are useful too. Li Wei shook his head. There is never a true dead end in this world, only people who cannot find a way. If there is no road, then we will dig one. If everyone here is an enemy, then I will face everyone. Chapter 173, Rivers of Blood. It sounds simple, but it's not easy to pull off, LOTR said. I don't know how you're going to do it. Are you going to conjure a dragon out of thin air to fight for you? Philodon added with a grin. Not yet, Li Wei replied. LOTR eyed him skeptically as he wrapped the broken staff fragments in cloth. If you need help, my bow and sword are at your service. And mine, Philodon said. Bow, sword, dagger. LOTR shot him a look. You had to mention the dagger. You'll have to help me control this place, cannot, especially the king when he sobers up, Li Wei said. That's easy, LOTR said, putting the staff fragments away. I know him well. When he wakes, I'll have a proper talk with him. Persuasion and conversation are our strengths. What if he won't listen? I can use swordsmanship too. Then I'll leave it to you, Li Wei said, nodding. This man had been here for thousands of years. Even without his staff, his skills were fearsome, rivaling the toughest elves. Any mines nearby? Li Wei asked. I've never been here, Philodon admitted. There are a few, but not many. North of the city, there's a small pit, but the metal yields poor, full of impurities, LOTR added. Impurities? Yes, but useful. The East Yai use them to make those new firebombs. They even form bomber squads around them. Li Wei's eyes brightened. Those impurities, are they highly combustible? Does the powder explode? How did you know? LOTR grumbled. There's so much of it the temporary warehouses can't hold it all. If there weren't other uses, I'd throw it away. Don't throw it away. Give it to me. How much? Li Wei held out his hand. All of it. North of Connaught lay wilderness, and beyond that, East Yai. South of the city, a ringed river gave way to a vast desert, sand as far as the eye could see. Merchants had been whispering about a gargantuan sandworm awakening at the desert's edge that had swallowed a bottomless pit. Nomads were terrified. How big must that worm be? They whispered. As big as me. Li Wei set up in the mine pit's storage area, opening and closing crates as he mixed compounds and assembled charges. Red blocks, the sulfur and saltpeter residues, sat in heaps. Are you sure about storing these here? Philodon asked, eyeing the torches and the volatile blocks around them. He remembered, with a cold flash, the 100-strong warg unit wiped out years ago by just such explosives. It's fine. They won't explode by themselves. Li Wei laughed, stacking another set of charges. Who knew the mine's impurities had so much sulfur and saltpeter? When I was at Roadside Fort, I wished for dirt like this every day. With the powder, gunpowder manufacture was trivial. The workbench handled ratios and mixing. How's LOTR with the king? Li Wei asked. He says they're getting along, Philodon replied, watching the city. But I haven't seen the king. Whatever, so long as things are stable. They worked. Li Wei dismantled the bench, stuffed his backpack full of explosives, and smiled. Time for the next step. A flat plain of sand and scrub stretched before the city gate. That morning, the king had ordered everyone forbidden to leave the city for a day. Nobles complained. Merchants guessed a fugitive chase. When the gates opened 3 days later, the plain looked strangely even, unnerving many. On the fourth morning, LOTR burst in. They're here, the army's not far, visible from the walls. The gates have been closed. Connaught's soldiers and guard captain are agitated. They want the king's word, surrender or fight. And the king? Li Wei asked. He hasn't decided yet. My voice works only so long. Once the army reaches the wall, my words lose their edge. Magic voice. Li Wei smiled. Some wizards used such speech to twist hearts. LOTR had the talent. Let him wake fully. A horn sounded. LOTR followed and climbed the wall. Below, a dense host, orcs with monstrous beasts, steel-armored Olog as vanguard, orcs and Uruk as main infantry, East Yi cavalry and bomb-throwers in the rear. Siege ladders and a few catapults were arrayed on the plain. An Uruk messenger rode forward on a warg, intent on demanding surrender. The city gates swung open. A human stepped out. Maggot, ready to surrender? The Uruk spat curses. Falodin reached for his bow, but LOTR held him. Liwei watched the messenger, then the black mass of the army, and said calmly, I've had some new insights. I'll give you a chance. Surrender, and you might live a few more days. Fight, and you'll face destruction. The Uruk's reply was laughter, then the horn. Attack. They charged. The gates closed. Liwei stood at the gate as the mass advanced. A wooden pressure plate snapped under a charging foot. A faint hiss sounded, almost lost amid the footsteps. Then, boom! TNT detonated beneath the first ranks. One crater, then another, then a chain. White flashes and shockwaves plowed the battlefield from edge to edge. Magma, released from the smelting below, bloomed into the air and ran across the plain, burning boots and beasts and staining the ground red. Screams, collapsing beasts, writhing wargs. The front ranks disintegrated. East Yi cavalry halted in shock. An army that could have challenged the White City on the Pelennor fields lost half its strength before it even reached the walls. As the attackers staggered, a cold shadow swept over the battlefield, and a terrible, keening sound rolled out, a sound that froze men in place. Liwei turned to see a black horse gallop forward. Its rider was sometimes solid, sometimes translucent. Explosions slid beneath him harmlessly. Ringwraiths, Kamal, the shadow of the east, had finally shown himself. The black horse halted. The demonic figure dissolved into the wind and then reappeared before Liwei, Morgul blade flashing. Kamal's strike phased, aimed to pass straight through armor and flesh. Liwei met him with steel. Ambered runes sprang to life around Liwei, armor break blocking the Morgul blade's phasing, and Nemesis struck, searing into the shadow. Kamal screamed, his form flickered. Flames erupted, and the Morgul blade fell from numb fingers. The scream was a psychic wave. Many on the walls clutched their heads and fell, racked by panic. Even the king froze, a look of shame and fury on his face. The effect was indiscriminate, an area attack of pure terror. When Kamal's blade vanished and then reappeared, a shredded phantom held it. The rune shield neutralized the lingering poison, and Liwei downed a bottle of milk and a regeneration potion, clearing the contamination. He felt no fear. Where fear should have been, there was only clarity. Falodin gasped and knelt, breathless. The fear of the ringwraiths felt like lucid paralysis. LOTR's voice, stern and deep, pulled him upright. Seeing his terror fail to take hold, especially against this human, Kamal readied to vanish. Liwei pursued, but was just a breath too slow. Then LOTR raised his longsword and cried, "Let all shadows be revealed." A ripple of light exposed the wraith. Nemesis struck true, flames consuming the armor. Kamal writhed, his earthly shell fell to the ground as ashes, and the ringwraith's cry ripped through the plain. LOTR sagged, unused to wielding a sword instead of a staff. But the deed was done. The second of Sauron's powerful watchers had been felled on the battlefield. Still, ringwraiths could return as long as Sauron himself endured. But for now, the sight of their fallen leader broke the attackers' morale. Orcs and East Yi soldiers faltered, their eyes needle-sharp with fear when they met Liwei's gaze and the naked sword he held. "Useless creatures," the lead Uruk railed, but when Liwei stepped forward, even the Uruk took a step back. At that moment, a shout rose from the wall. A sharp sword had pierced LOTR's back. Someone had stabbed him and shoved him over. King of Khanate stood at the edge, chest-heaving, sword in hand. "You manipulative wizard," he spat. Falodin whirled. Fury lit his face. Liwei ran, pried open LOTR's jaw, poured in a regeneration potion, shoved a golden apple between his teeth. LOTR coughed, spat, and then sat up, bloodied but alive. "How dare you?" LOTR rasped. The king lunged for him again, and Liwei easily sent him sprawling with a quick strike. LOTR stood and bowed slightly. "Enough, Liwei. Consider it my request." Liwei hesitated, then lowered his sword. "I won't interfere in your private matters." The king trembled, fists clenched, then a distant drumbeat rolled. Horns sounded behind the White City. The three turned and ran toward the southern walls. A new force had arrived. Haradrim war elephants, siege engines, and a fresh cohort of soldiers, led by another ringwraith, with generals behind him. Haradrim, LOTR breathed. A third army? Why were they not reported? There was no sign in our intelligence, Falodon said. They arrived suddenly. Perhaps because of me, Li Wei said, and he strode out through the south gate with his sword drawn. 3 ringwraiths detached from the formation and charged. LOTR shouted and revealed them. They struck with 3 Morgul blades. Li Wei blocked one with his longsword, a shield rang against another, and an ancient tomb blade intercepted the third. Then Li Wei leapt into the thick of it. He ripped Nemesis free, trapped a Morgul blade, and cleaved through a ringwraith's helmet. Followed and pressed forward and finished another. LOTR's spellwork and swordplay took down the third. Without the ringwraith's shadow, the Harad army wavered, but numbers are stubborn things. A war elephant charged. An ender pearl blinked at the general's feet as Li Wei teleported in and struck upward. Man and beast flew. Nemesis tore through Mumakul flesh as if it were paper. Flames burst along the elephant's flank, scattering the archers and spearmen on its tower. The rune shield shattered under the impact. A belt's emergency mechanism triggered, and a shockwave toppled another elephant. The Harad commander's lieutenant tried to rally his men. They shrieked and surged forward. "Kill him! Kill him!" the officer howled. They swarmed, all that training and courage ignited by rage. This human and his 2 companions were unlike any foe they'd faced, a man who defeated ringwraiths and cut down Mumakil as if they were no more than beasts. When the fighting ended, the combined armies of Mordor, East Yi, and Harad were broken in spirit and blood. They retreated, unwilling to press themselves further into the web of ambushes and explosives. No one knew where the human warrior ultimately went or how he vanished after the battle. He had slain Kamul beneath the Connaught White city, driven back the East Yi and Harad forces, and left a plain of ruined beasts and rivers of blood in his wake. Chapter 174. The Shadow of the East. Boom. An unprecedented thunderstorm swept over the Connaught's royal city. Heavy raindrops fell, gathering into streams that quenched the crimson magma, turning it into stone and glistening obsidian. A fierce wind whipped up the sand, filling pits and hollows. The land before the Connaught's gates was permanently altered. It was no longer only sand, but a mix of glassy obsidian and the cobbles that form around it. The warrior had left. Yet everything there announced to the forces of the East, and even to Mordor, that he had been present. People had wanted to call him the Eastern Shadow, but that title felt too small. They called him instead the War of Shadows. He started wars and then ended them himself. "Do you want to come back with us?" Li Wei asked LOTR on the wasteland between the Connaught and the East Yi. "Go back where? To the lands west of Mordor?" LOTR shook his head. "No, there are already plenty of people there, and other problems remain here." He looked further east. Beyond the East Yi lies a vast red mountain range and a wild forest where some dwarves and elves still live. They haven't been corrupted by the shadow the great enemy brings. It's been a long time since I visited them. I should go. All right, Li Wei did not press it. After a moment, he took a Malorn staff from his pack and offered it to LOTR. "This is a staff made from a Malorn branch?" LOTR's eyes lit up. He had not paid much attention during their fight before, but now the origin of the wood was clear. "Of course I can use it." He examined the staff, especially its core. "The workmanship isn't ordinary. It's not as fine as my original, but it will channel things. Do you want it or not?" Li Wei reached to take it back when LOTR hesitated. "Of course I want it." LOTR snatched the staff and tucked it into his robe. "Better to have it than not. My own staff may be different from the one you had. Yours has an ice core installed. With it you can make pebble-sized balls of ice, useful for cooling in summer." A gust of wind blew. Both of them felt a chill. Autumn was nearly over. LOTR waved a hand. "That's only a small thing. A wizard's strength isn't contained in his staff. Then I hope it helps you," Li Wei said. "My thanks." LOTR bowed slightly. "It is time to part. I hope we meet again, Stek. By then, perhaps it will be time for you to return home." "Home?" LOTR sighed, an expression of mixed feelings crossing his face. "I hope so." He changed the subject. "There are many strange things about this war, especially in the south. News from Parlando has been cut off." Parlando, the other blue robe? Li Wei asked. Has something happened to him? Since he went south, we haven't been in contact. Alatar's voice tightened. I invited Parlando to come along. If anything has happened to him, I won't have the face to return. Need help? I don't mind going south, Li Wei offered. No, this is my responsibility. Alatar shook his head. We are not as helpless as you think. Li Wei looked at him for a long moment. Then I wish you good luck. Falodon, who had listened quietly, stepped forward to bid farewell. Alatar smiled. Although our time together was short, I will not forget that I once met a brave and skilled Dunedain. He fumbled through his sea blue robe, searching for something to give. But after a long time, he found nothing. He sighed. I wanted to give you a parting gift, as in the stories, but I have nothing, so I offer only my blessing. May your people be free of curses, and may wind and courage always be with you. The farewell ended. Alatar stood there a long time, watching the two figures until they were small on the horizon, especially the black-clad one. Future images flickered through his eyes. Yes, courage, he murmured. May I have the courage to face everything. A shiver of shadow movement ran across the ground. In a brief start of panic, dark seeds stirred in the shadows, as if trying to climb free. Alatar jumped up and stomped on his shadow twice like a mischievous child. The shadow calmed. Taking the staff, he turned and walked eastward, his shadow following him. I always feel it's not that simple, Falodon whispered in the dark. In what way? Li Wei asked, voice low. Alatar doesn't look as settled as he seems. Li Wei widened his eyes but did not look back. Just a gut feeling. He doesn't look like someone recovering from a serious illness, nor someone perfectly healthy, nor someone clearly ailing. We should trust him. He can handle it. Clang, there was a tremor beneath them and a feeling of imbalance. The ferry at the dock had begun to move. Do we really have to sneak in? Falodon complained in the cramped cabin. The dock's restrictions have been lifted. With that elf's permission, we could have gone through normal channels. I don't want to. Li Wei shook his head. Have you forgotten a few days ago? After those soldiers recognized me, they wouldn't speak, just turned and left, cold as ice. I wouldn't blame them, Falodon said quietly. If it were me, I'd run too. A few days later, the easternmost vineyard of Dorwinion received 2 guests. When the steward at the estate saw them, one a wandering ranger, the other, his hand trembled. Rumors from the east? What had that to do with Dorwinion? War and wine were separate things. He forced a polite greeting. The owner of the estate, Orifer, a Dorwinion elf who had lived for at least 2 ages, was stunned to see Li Wei again. How long has it been since we last met? He asked. Less than half a year, I think. Half a year? With the way the rumors fly these days, I thought half an age had passed. Orifer shook his head. Before you arrived, there were constant whispers in the eastern borders about East Yi raids. A shadow hung over people's heads, and no one knew when it would fall. But now it's gone. The shadow over Dorwinion has lifted because another shadow covers the east. He brings war and then scatters it, like a shadow. A shadow, or a shadow of light? Li Wei asked. Who can say? Let them talk. Orifer waved a hand. Exaggerated stories spread faster, especially when they're true. Also, Orifer added, there's something I must tell you. Could you come see the 2 horses you entrusted to me? They've been giving my stableman a great deal of trouble. Chapter 175, Return and Valley Mobilization. I'm almost certain he dragged out the conversation just to bring up that last matter, Falodon murmured. No rumor will fix a stable hand's headache, Li Wei replied as he led 2 saddled horses into a stall in Long Lake Town. He left them there rather than entrusting anyone else with them. Elves are like that, especially elders, but an elf like Orifer is still rare. Thin curls of steam rose in the cooling air. The ranger and the lord had finished their journey. Aren't you staying a bit longer? Li Wei asked. My kin need me. I have to return, Falodon said. You're busier than you let on. Falodon turned and smiled. Even if I had twice the work, I wouldn't be as busy as you. Li Wei fell silent. Not long after Falodon left, another visitor appeared. You're finally back. Bard stood by the construction site outside town, watching the roadworks. The road has reached a critical point. There are some decisions I can't make on my own. What's the problem? Li Wei asked. It's the Misty Mountains. Bard led him inside and, as was his habit, made Li Wei a cup of tea. He spread a map on the table and pointed to the route Li Wei had drawn. "The project is progressing well. It's now near the Misty Mountains," he said. "But that mountain is the trouble." He tapped a spot near Aigu. "To continue the road, we'll have to cut through. That's not difficult. The residents can use the large block magic you taught them, but there's an unexpected issue." He pointed to the front of the road. "Some road workers accidentally broke into a huge cavern." "Is that a problem?" Li Wei asked. "It's a big problem." Bard's tone darkened. "That place is called Orktown. It's full of goblins. We almost suffered casualties." "I'll go and wipe them out, or at least drive them off," Li Wei said. Goblins had long infested the area around Aigu, plaguing travelers. Even if the main entrance were sealed, they burrowed deep and could always exploit a side tunnel. Clearing them now would be ideal. Bard was quiet for a moment, then sat forward, serious. "That's precisely why this isn't something you should handle personally." Li Wei blinked. "You mean you pity the goblins?" "That's not it." Bard gave a rare, firm interruption. "I never pitied orcs or goblins. What I mean is this. If every local problem requires the Lord to solve it, people will never grow beyond being infants in a cradle." "You once told me to strengthen the border defenses and expand the army," Bard reminded him. "You also said, when we discussed education, that physical training should be emphasized." Li Wei's memory sharpened. "Yes, I wanted residents to be able to arm themselves and defend the territory, not just wait for death. So I convened representatives from every community and the relevant professionals," Bard continued. "In the last 6 months, we've trained all healthy people, men and women, regardless of trade, in basic combat during their spare time. We now have an armed populace. They can be mustered at a moment's notice to attack Orktown and drive out the goblins." "You don't need to lift a finger," Bard said. "Your approval is the only thing required." Li Wei considered it. With the territory's production, weapons, and supplies were plentiful. Many adults had already taken up arms during the 5 armies battle and learned city defense. Add the recent training, and in theory, any capable person could don armor and fight. An armed populace, indeed. "The new force still needs a trial by fire," Bard added. "The goblins, not as strong as orcs but vicious enough, are a suitable target." "All right, thinking of it that way, it makes sense." Li Wei nodded. "I'll go with you." Bard's face grew solemn. "We will give it our all and won't disappoint you." Although Li Wei could have cleared the goblins on his own, or even done nothing and let the town's defenses hold, he agreed. Letting the residents act had its own value. In the meeting by the fireplace, they decided Li Wei would serve as overall commander for the expedition to Orktown, with Bard as his assistant. Bard also set the date and the route. Li Wei walked out of the mayor's office, scratching his head. Lead an army. Him. It hadn't quite settled in. Since arriving in this world, he'd fought countless skirmishes and battles, defended cities, slain enemy leaders, and routed armies, most often acting alone. On the battlefield, he had always been free, neither commanded nor commanding. No one had the authority to give him orders, and he preferred not to command others. The only notable exception had been that odd moment with the orcs, waving flags on Azog's platform. Still, Bard's plan made sense. It was time to let the territory fend for itself, and to lead them in doing so. News spread quickly. The Lord himself would lead the expedition to clear the goblins from Orktown. A surge of fighting spirit, restless energy, and hope ran like wildfire through the streets and alleys. Bard issued a temporary decree limiting how many could join the expedition so things would proceed in order, and recruitment began by the book. Everything moved forward, calculated, orderly, and for the first time, the residents were being called on to rise and fight for their own valley. Chapter 176, The Proclamation. How many people answered the call? No one could give a precise number. What was certain was that the River Valley ultimately sent exactly 3,500 men to war, no more, no less, each clad in full plate armor, superbly made and offering maximum protection. It was an impressive sight, so formidable that even Li Wei felt a headache simply looking at it. Setting aside their fighting skill, in terms of equipment, this force could rival dwarves and elves. "What's all the commotion?" Thorin demanded as he hurried out of the hall in Erebor. On the walls of the Lonely Mountain, the dwarf royal family gathered, Balin, Gloin, and others, peering down at the well-equipped troops assembling nearby. The men's movements were a little stiff, as if this wasn't a regular battlefield but a first parade. "I know them," Balin said, squinting. "They're from River Valley City and Long Lake Town. The third soldier from the left in the front row asked me how to fight an orc 2 years ago." "And what did you tell him?" someone asked. "Hit them on the head," Balin answered. "No, that's too vague. If an orc charges, you should—" "Stop! We should be talking about that army," Feely cut in, ever impulsive. "Is Li Wei planning an attack?" There was a beat of silence, then surprise spread from face to face. To assemble such a force, what kind of task required it? And if the objective could really be handled by this many, then why assemble at all? "Maybe it's just training," someone offered. "Where are they headed?" another asked. "Toward Long Lake Town," came the reply. "The road's been extended near the Misty Mountains." "Orc Town," several dwarves said in unison. Gloin scowled. "They're heading to Orc Town and they didn't even tell us?" "That's the problem," another voice said, and a clamor rose. No one had forgotten their torments there. The spiked whips and clubs that had left scars if their skin had been tender. "Thorin, I want to join them. You can't stop me, can you?" Feely burst out. Thorin's gaze drifted over the assembled dwarves, and then he nodded. "Of course. And I'm going," another added. "Me too." The idea spread like wildfire. They treated it like an excursion rather than a campaign. Even Thorin seemed lighter as they made for the armory. "Wait," Thorin said suddenly. "We haven't discussed this with Li Wei." Moments later, in front of River Valley City, Li Wei watched the noble dwarves stand before him, armor gleaming. He scratched his head. Thorin stepped forward, holding his helmet. "I heard you're going to attack Orktown. Do you need help?" "Where did you hear that?" Li Wei asked. Thorin hedged. "News travels. With such a large movement, rumors spread." "No need." Li Wei shook his head. "They're just goblins. I can handle them on my own, especially with these troopers around." "The goblins in Orktown could use some growth," one of the dwarves muttered, disappointed. Thorin lowered his voice and leaned in. "Li Wei, I know what you said, but don't forget the mine's winding passages, the dangers of drawbridges and secret doors." Li Wei paused. A straight-on assault might crush the small, poorly equipped goblins, but the cave complex was like fighting in a built city. Ambushes could be costly. "I'll blow up the cave and fill it in. They'll have nowhere to hide," he said. Thorin sighed, a tired, genuine sound. "Since Erebor was reclaimed, there have been endless affairs. I've been sitting in the hall for years. I fear I'm getting rusty." Li Wei stared at him a few seconds, then relented. "All right, guides would help." "In underground matters, the dwarves are experts," Thorin said. So in the end, the dwarves joined, not by sending whole regiments, but by supplying guides, along with many members of the royal family and their king, who would witness the campaign. The soldiers shifted as one and looked up toward Li Wei, discipline and battle intent burning in their eyes. Their morale was boundless, so long as the thing they had sworn to serve remained. A wind, carrying a fine dust, swept across the square and then died away. For a long moment, no one moved. The ranks stood motionless, staring at the black-clad figure at their head. Bard, standing beside Li Wei, prodded his armor and whispered, "It's your turn." "What?" Li Wei asked, turning his head slightly. Bard took a breath. "So many answered the call these past days, more than I had to turn some away. When the call went out, the pastry chef closed shop. Fishermen and road workers and boatmen left their duties. Even the servers in the inns and the women cooking at home came to ask if they could help." "All because of you," Bard said softly. "You carry the people's faith and will. They're watching you. They know who's responsible for the life we have now." Li Wei's face grew serious as he scanned the rows of faces, young and old, hardened and gentle. Though he seldom showed himself, his influence was present in every change across the territory. The daily wonders and protections reminded people their lord was there, even when unseen. He stepped forward and spoke, quieter than a battlefield shout, but every word clear. "My people," he began. There was a small tremor in his voice. He could have shouted over an army of enemies, but when he spoke to his own, he was gentle. "I know what you are feeling now. I can see the fire in your hearts, the readiness to fight. You obey my order and follow me not because I am greater than you, but because together we have made a better life than before. But this prosperity wasn't built by me alone. It was built by all of you, by every hand in this territory. For a better life, for a higher purpose, for lasting peace, advance. It was a simple speech, no flowing rhetoric, no extravagant fervor. Yet that day, those words shook the river valley and the mountains themselves. Chapter 177, title. A vast army filed out from the wide plaza and marched briskly along the smooth road toward Long Lake Town. A few dwarves had come along, more because they could help than because anyone had called them. Why didn't they tell us? One grumbled. They probably thought it was only goblins, another said. True enough. Inside the lonely mountain, the dwarves were abuzz, retelling the earth-shaking roar and guessing when the river valley forces would return. The hall was lively. Not everyone was satisfied with frivolity, though. I have something to report to the king, said a dwarf in charge of the industrial district as he strode toward the meeting hall. The king isn't here, Balin, guarding the door, replied. He entrusted all matters to me before he left, the dwarf protested. Just tell someone what you need. Balin, still in armor, cut him off with thinly veiled irritation. Let me handle it. And where's the king? The other demanded. You can curb your curiosity a bit, Balin snapped. On the Sky Road, really beneath the massive support pillars of that towering viaduct, Thorin watched batches of soldiers being lifted upward by the elevators. Emotion swelled in him. My aim's still true, he laughed. I hope they give me a good fight. Dwalin brandished his throwing axes. I've been itching for orcs. Filey smirked. Same. Too much training, not enough chopping. Aha, my axe is getting impatient, Gloin crowed from the back. Liwei pressed a hand down to calm the dwarf in front of him. What's wrong, Liwei? Gloin asked. Liwei turned. Why are you here? Where else would I be? Gloin looked puzzled. Oh, this is... Liwei indicated the young dwarf practically bouncing at their feet. Gloin slapped his forehead. Right, I forgot to introduce you. This is my boy Gimli. He moved here from the Blue Mountains recently. He heard you were going to attack Orc Town and insisted on coming. He looks spirited. He'll do well, Liwei said, smiling at Gimli. Gloin beamed and shouted, Gimli, greet your uncle Liwei. Stop, Liwei interjected quickly, changing the subject. Let's talk about the attack. To many dwarves, he still looked like a child, but Gimli, at over 60 by dwarven years, was no uncle. The younger dwarf bristled but let it go. What's there to discuss? We've agreed on the plan. Orc Town has only a few main passages you and Bard know well. We charge in and cut the goblins down. Aha! Of course, came the reply. Routes and passages weren't the problem. There were ways through if needed. Liwei glanced at his map. The cave map, his record of the terrain beneath the surface, laid out not only Orc Town, but also the routes through Moria. It would keep them from getting lost in areas they'd already scouted. They'd explored more than half of Orc Town when they chased the Goblin King last time. Have you all brought enough food? Liwei asked casually. Of course. Rations for many days, hardly spoil, someone answered. Good, Liwei said. And if you're wounded, come to me. We have what we need for treatment. As long as a soldier wasn't dead, he could be saved. Logistics over, they set out. On the surface, the march toward the Misty Mountains might have taken weeks, but the road they had built changed everything. The Sky Road sliced through terrain and obstacles, eliminating unexpected delays. They advanced at a steady, astonishing pace. Nearly 500 kilometers were covered in a few days, without even using carts, so the goblins inside the mountain hadn't yet reacted. Soldiers were drawn up at the end of the road. Liwei moved through the formation and connected the road to the mountain. Moments later, boom! Explosions echoed as tunnels opened. The goblins, who had slept in the dark caves for so long, suddenly saw light pouring in. They woke as if the sky itself had fallen. Get up, you good-for-nothings! The goblins recovered and swarmed out, crawling from ceilings, spilling from side tunnels, pouring from every hole like ants. They came bearing crude scrap metal and makeshift weapons in dense, seething waves. Their numbers were at least twice those of the River Valley army. The battle broke out abruptly. Many of the soldiers, seeing the wild, shrieking goblins charging, gripped weapons and shields for the first time in real combat. Training had been one thing. This was another. A single mistake could mean death. Fear and tension ran through the ranks, until, at a yawning opening in the rock, a black-clad figure planted himself and split light from dark. He raised a longsword that gleamed with blue energy and shouted, "Prepare to meet the enemy." The men steadied. "Charge with me," he roared. Li Wei was the first to surge forward. Bard froze for a heartbeat, then realized the timing was wrong. "Wait, don't," he shouted, but it was too late. The soldiers, their fear transmuted into raw rage and a will to fight, lifted their weapons and followed that figure. Bard ground his teeth, thinking he'd have to punish Li Wei later for that reckless timing, but the moment was already gone, so he drew his bow and ran with the tide. "All right," Thorin said, shrugging, and unsheathed the sword he'd forged. "Let's go." "For peace and safety," someone else shouted. Rumble. The first goblins hit the line. At the front, when Li Wei revealed the glowing blade, some of the goblins faltered. Recognizing him, they hesitated. When he met the charge, his single presence checked the tide, scattering the front ranks. "You good-for-nothings. If anyone takes another step back, I'll chop him to scrap," barked a voice behind the goblins, an organizer trying to rally them. The goblins paused, caught between pushing forward and falling back. After a tense instant, they bypassed the black figure, passing along the edges where his reach was thinner. A ring of emptiness opened around Li Wei, like opposing magnets forcing a gap. He ran several steps into a side tunnel, but could not locate the voice that had rallied the goblins. Whoosh! An arrow flew from behind, skimming past Li Wei and stabbing into the depths of the cave. The rallying voice cut off mid-command and never sounded again. "Nice shot," Bard called from behind, and Li Wei waved in thanks. Bard the master archer had done his work. With their organizer gone, the goblins who had skirted Li Wei now slammed into the River Valley troops. Steel and metal met in a chaotic maelstrom. "For the Lord," the soldiers cried as they threw themselves into the fray. The goblin vanguard stared in horror at this seasoned, armored army. Their airborne commander's reckless tactics had cost them dearly. The first wave crashed and broke, and then combat descended into brutal, confused hand-to-hand fighting. A soldier found himself surrounded by 5 snarling goblins who knocked him down and rained blows across his armor. Pain seared him. Was this the end? "No," he gasped, and then, as if from somewhere beyond the noise, Li Wei's name rang out through the melee. "For Lord Li Wei." Courage flared in the man's chest. He rose, shield lifted, and struck back. Even those goblins who never saw Li Wei in person felt a chill run through them at the sound of his name, the kind of fear that tenses muscles and slows breath. The battle burned on, brutal and fierce, but the army had found its anchor. Chapter 178, Escape, Estelle. In a clearing in Rivendell, Elrond called Aragorn over as the young ranger practiced his swordplay and spoke softly. "Do you know there have been many valorous elves and men whose deeds are unmatched, whose very names chill their enemies? Among them is a name you must know, Ecthelion. In a great war that no elf likes to speak of, he slew 2 orc chieftains and 3 Balrogs. His name became a war cry among the elves. Whenever that name is heard, orcs falter. You can use such a name in future encounters with orcs to sap their morale before the fight." Aragorn listened closely and nodded. "I remember." He hesitated a moment then, and Elrond asked, "Is there something else?" "May I shout the names of others before battle to the same effect?" Aragorn asked. "Of course," Elrond replied. Then, with a hint of curiosity, he inclined his head. "Who did you have in mind?" "Li Wei," Aragorn said. "Li Wei!" Bard cut down a dozen goblins in a rush to the cave mouth and strode forward. "Promise me next time you'll consult me first." The charge had been reckless, more reckless than a thinking machine, which at least would have switched to a bow when melee was unwise. Li Wei had simply run headlong in. "You were lucky." Bard looked over the men behind him and breathed easier. Under the example of veterans, the green recruits, many fighting for the first time, had adjusted quickly and begun to cut down enemies with surprising efficiency. "It's a miracle," Bard said. "Not one man fell in that charge." The charge had been crude, but effective. Li Wei had been like a grenade of fear. Thrown forward, the goblin formation had broken. From now on, the idea was simple. Send him in first, and the lines would scatter. "Of course there won't be any losses," Li Wei said without turning his head. "I've been watching." Bard blinked. Indeed, since Li Wei's dash forward, he had not gone deep into the tunnel, but had stood to observe the battlefield. With him watching, casualties had been kept improbably low. Still, Bard was not satisfied. That's no excuse, he shook his head. After this, you must go to training. I'll fetch the best teacher I can find. Li Wei's heart tightened at the word training. He managed a weak, evasive, "The wind is a bit strong." "You," Bard began. "Li Wei." Thorin ran up then. "Splendid. Braver than the bravest dwarf I've ever known, and more reckless than the most foolhardy dwarf." Li Wei, as if seeing a friend, walked quickly to Thorin. "You too," he said. By now, the goblins pouring from the cave had been almost wiped out, having lost their leader, an arrow from Bard's bow, and facing a disciplined force, the survivors scattered like headless things. Those still within the cave, seeing the army surge at the mouth, fell back and would not sally out again. Unexpected though it had been, the men left the scene with hard-earned experience in sudden close-quarters combat. Every blade bore goblin blood. "They've retreated," someone reported. The road lay clear. The soldiers reformed and waited orders. Bard looked toward the dark throat of the cave and said, "The hardest part is next." "It's our turn," Thorin said, and led a company of dwarves forward. Orktown's passages, apart from a few wide avenues, were low and twisting, places poorly suited to human tactics. In such tunnels, tactics and method mattered more than numbers. If dwarves crowded the way, an entire host could be cut to pieces. "Still, no matter how fierce, they're only goblins," Dwalin said, hefting his axe. "Once there were only a dozen of us going in and out. Now we have 3,500. He did not mention Li Wei and Gandalf, who had once been with them. The boast was clean and cheerful without that detail. Several commanders huddled at the cave mouth to lay plans. "Goblins aren't clever. Their digging may have made the place intricate, but the structure is simple enough. We saw that ourselves. Smoke, fire, and water will always work," another added. They would press into the tunnels without giving the goblins time to regroup. Though not a vast army, this force was an elite one. Men-at-arms, seasoned commanders, dwarf guides, each capable of holding a front. Their opponent, leaderless now, could only be driven out, scattered, or destroyed. Today, this notorious orc base, long a scourge on travelers and nearby villages, would end. Deep beneath, a tremor went through the earth, and a pair of pale eyes opened. "What's that noise? Gollum?" hissed the creature. His thin hands fumbled over his lank hair. "Oh, this isn't a dream, precious. It's gone. It's gone. Damn it, Gollum. Damn thief." He sniffed, detecting blood and the smell of burning. "What are those skinny, nasty goblins doing again, Gollum?" Footsteps slapped on stone above, heavier than goblin padding. Gollum's eyes widened as he crouched behind a rock beside the pool. Suddenly, several goblin corpses thudded nearby and scattered a fainty fear through him. "Food from the sky? Gollum? No, no," he whispered. He did not emerge, only peered out from his hiding place. A while later came voices. "Just as the Lord said, inside is a natural cavern." "How lucky," one voice said. "Could our Lord have X-ray sight?" another muttered. "Less chatter. Don't lower your guard. Report the situation." "No movement," came an answer. The scouts signaled for the men to pull back. Gollum let his breath out slowly, thinking to come out and look. Then a figure walked in. A sudden chill raced through him. He felt watched. "Why do I feel a gaze?" he muttered. Li Wei moved through the gloom, looked left and right, then looked up and saw a bat clinging to the cave roof. He stepped to the pool's edge, drew his bow, and released an arrow that struck the bat down. In Middle-earth, such creatures often served dark ends. A spy bat could be fatal if left alive. Gollum clenched himself until the stranger had gone by, and only then let a longer breath pass. "We can't stay here," one voice in him said. "It's too dangerous, Gollum," the other replied. "Where shall we go?" he asked in a thin voice. "Anywhere but here," they said aloud. "We should go and find that thief, the damned thief who took our precious Gollum. Even if this hadn't happened, we should have hunted him before. Yes, find that Hobbit, Baggins." And so, in the year 2944 of the Third Age, driven by fear of the armies of the river and the pull of the One Ring, Gollum overcame his dread of sun and open sky and slipped out of the misty mountains to seek the creature that had stolen his precious. Chapter 179, Peaceful Alert. The fighting dragged on for several days. Orktown, inside and out, was searched with relentless thoroughness. Most of the goblins were wiped out. Only a few slipped away to the north, toward Gundabad or into the high mountains. Their presence would soon be negligible. There would be no more worry about goblins preying on nearby settlements. The united force from the river valley had produced miraculous results on this first expedition, speed of deployment and march that bordered on legendary for Middle-earth. Remarkably, the army had no mounts, yet they still set what felt like a new record for rapid movement. Not a single one left inside, someone reported. Bard watched as soldiers hauled out boxes of plunder, looking a little stunned. "I never knew you were like this," he told Li Wei. "How do you remember all the tunnels and routes so well?" "Maybe it's a gift," Li Wei said, unabashed. "If I've walked a path once, I won't forget it." "It's just that I passed through here before," he added. "When I hunted the Goblin King, I wandered these caverns for a long time. The place left a deep impression." Bard accepted the answer. People were complicated. Seen from another angle, a different side could appear. He turned his attention to the piled-up treasures lining the road. "What are you going to do with all this?" "Dispose of it as you please," Li Wei replied. Li Wei picked up a silver platter and read the faint engraving, "Made in Rivendell." How did they get something like this? Stolen from the elves? At once, the dwarves who had been celebrating fell awkwardly silent. They averted their eyes and started whistling. Thorin's mouth twitched. He cleared his throat to draw attention. "If you'll have it," he said, "I will buy all the tableware, candlesticks, and decorations marked Rivendell." Bard blinked. "The King of Erebor wants elven goods? Why?" "I wish to return them to Rivendell," Thorin said. Bard stared for several seconds. A dwarf voluntarily giving things back to the elves. That was unexpected. He stepped forward and saluted Thorin. "As a king of dwarves, your generosity is admirable." Thorin accepted the compliment with a slow, dignified nod. A dwarf muttered under his breath and received a sharp kick for his trouble. Thorin waved it off. "No need," he said. Li Wei smiled. "If that's your wish, take them. We don't lack such things, and you fought beside us at Orktown. You earned them." With Li Wei's blessing, Thorin turned to his company. "You know how to spot Rivendell's silver, yes?" he asked. "Go find it yourselves." The dwarves, suddenly energized, set off at once. Gimli watched his uncles with a puzzled expression. "They really can tell elven things apart?" Thorin patted the boy's shoulder. "Be an honest dwarf, Gimli. Don't take what isn't yours." Gimli, not entirely understanding, but eager to obey the king, banged his chest in a show of earnestness. "I swear I will." The army returned to town in triumph, marching into the cheers and applause of the residents. For the first time in memory, the streets were packed with celebrating people. Laughter and music filled the air. Lamps burned late into the night. Even dwarves from Erebor came to join the festivities after hearing the news. Several hundred miles to the east of the White City, in the shadow of Minas Morgul, the Witch King felt a prick of unease. His spies, bats, had relayed an image that unsettled him. A massive, unfinished viaduct, at least 100 meters wide, spanning the sky and linking Long Lake Town to Orktown across the Misty Mountains. The fact that a human army had used that incomplete road to cross so quickly was terrifying. If completed, the viaduct would knit the north of east and west together into an almost impenetrable barrier and make the revival of Angmar impossible. Such a structure had to be either destroyed or controlled. "Orktown no longer exists," an orc reported, trembling as he delivered the news. The Witch King listened, his armor emitting a faint, high sound as he paced the great hall. He thought of the last image from his bats, the arrow in the cave, and most of all, the one who had loosed it. Destroying or seizing that road now seemed beyond reach. Standing idly by was unthinkable, but striking on the eastern side of the mountains would be difficult. Perhaps the western side could be used. Angmar still sheltered scattered orcs and mountain folk, and the Ettenmoors had ogres. Those forces, combined with the whites of the ancient tombs, could assemble an army, but that region was watched by Lindon, Rivendell, rangers, and nearby humans and hobbits. It was hardly a prudent plan. Another ringwraith entered then. "The master knows what you ponder," he said quietly. "Do not act rashly," the newcomer advised. "Lie low for now." The Witch King nodded, relief easing the pressure on him. If action was to be taken, the matter now rested with Sauron. Beneath Mordor, flames guttered and the Dark Lord turned his attention to other concerns. Far to the west, in the wilderness between the misty mountains and the dark forest near Dol Guldur, Gandalf paused on a ridge. He had caught sight of a thin, odd little figure among the trees and squinted, studying it curiously. "A creature I've never seen before," he murmured. He watched the figure for a long moment and then shrugged slightly. "Forget it. Nothing to worry about," he decided and moved on. Gollum, racing across the wilderness under the scorching sun, had no idea he had narrowly escaped a disaster. Gandalf, who rode fast through the same lands, was far more concerned with the stirrings around the Lonely Mountain and the river valley than with any single stray creature. It was rare for Li Wei to take the initiative and lead troops somewhere. If he wasn't curious, would he still be a wizard? Gandalf could not keep away. He had to see what was happening. Early that morning in River Valley City, Gandalf tied his horse to the trough outside the inn, fed it a handful of wheat, patted its head, and climbed toward the palace on the hill. From a distance, the sharp-eyed dwarf Fili spotted the old man in gray and called out. Gandalf waved. Fili jumped and waved back. When Gandalf reached the steps, Fili greeted him warmly. "How have you been?" Gandalf asked with a smile. "Never better, Gandalf. You missed a perfectly executed campaign and a feast to match," Fili replied. "That's a shame. I've been wandering about, trying my luck," Gandalf said cheerfully. "Trying your luck?" "Yes. So many coincidences happen every moment. Who knows when one will land at my feet?" "Isn't that interesting?" Fili frowned in confusion before shaking his head. "Then you'll miss many coincidences. Stop being mysterious. Li Wei and Bard are in the council. Thorin will be here soon. We're having a final celebratory dinner tonight, cooked by Li Wei himself. Don't miss that coincidence." Gandalf raised an eyebrow. "That would be fine. But I don't agree with you, Fili. What matters isn't coincidence or inevitability. It's being there to participate and to see for yourself." "Like eating. You're not here just to fill your belly, are you?" Fili said. "Exactly. With Li Wei cooking, it's hardly just a meal. To be able to cook that well and still prefer rations, if it were Bombur, he'd live in the kitchen," Fili laughed. "Who knows?" Gandalf replied, and they entered together. Inside the palace, Li Wei and Bard sat at a council table in quiet discussion. "Since the roads are repaired and there are no nearby threats, why not build more houses and expand the town?" Li Wei suggested. "Then it's settled." Bard agreed, and the small meeting wound down. Gandalf and Fili approached. Gandalf opened his mouth to greet them, but when Li Wei looked at him with that knowing gaze, Gandalf seemed to think better of his planned words and closed his mouth. A short silence hung between them. "Ahem," Gandalf cleared his throat. "This bright morning, surely someone will say hello to an old traveler?" Li Wei smiled. "Yes, the weather is clear. Have you eaten?" Gandalf blinked in surprise. Using "have you eaten" as a greeting was unexpected. He must have picked it up from the hobbits. He swallowed the reply he'd been about to give and said, "I have." "Then don't eat too much at noon. There's a small banquet tonight." "Of course not. I know my limits," Gandalf said with a twinkle. "So," Li Wei continued conversationally, "I heard you launched an expedition against Orktown." Gandalf, his earlier attempt at a greeting foiled, went straight to the point. "As a lord, you truly cannot sit still. It's only been a year since we parted. That eyesore in the mountains is gone. The people who live nearby, Bjorn's kin in particular, are grateful." "Because they blocked my path," Li Wei shrugged. "It was literal. They had impeded him." After the pleasantries, Gandalf asked, "Any other news?" Wizards never visited with no purpose unless they were truly on holiday. "Nothing major," Gandalf said at first, then added, "but a few things are worth mentioning. On my way here, I saw a strange creature that came out of the misty mountains. It crawled on all fours, like a degenerate goblin. Could it have been a runaway goblin?" Bard suggested. "No," Gandalf said. "It was thin and small like a goblin, but not the same. I have a feeling it was Gollum." "Gollum?" Li Wei repeated, immediately remembering the name. Gandalf frowned, thinking, "Yes, there's some memory of him in my mind. A strange, unpleasant fellow who caused trouble and was driven out. He holds many secrets and has outlived his years, perhaps cursed or twisted by black magic. In any case, he's not a good sign." "Pitiful, too," Li Wei conceded, and they let the topic drop. "I've just come from Gondor," Gandalf said, changing the subject. "Their situation has brightened. The pressure from Mordor has eased. They've retaken some ground and even pushed a commando all the way to the gates of Minas Morgul. Gandalf's tone warned them. But they did not enter. That land is shrouded in poisonous mists and curses. For mortals, simply breathing there is torture. Even if you cover your mouth and nose, remaining in that place makes you fall ill. Minas Morgul is filled with despair. Sending even 10,000 well-armed soldiers there would be slaughter. I won't order an attack on it, Gandalf added. At most, I might see it myself. You said Mordor's pressure has lessened, Luwei prompted. Yes. The Haradrim in the south halted their offensive, and many of Mordor's troops have withdrawn. I suspect internal problems, Gandalf said. There were indeed problems, Luwei replied. You know about them? Gandalf asked sharply. Luwei met his gaze. The East Yai and Mordor formed a coalition to subjugate the Khanate, and those traitors aligned with it. The Haradrim took part, and they even used war oliphants. Gandalf narrowed his eyes. How would you know that? Luwei smiled faintly. I just came back from there.